I think it's on. Is it on? I'm going to hide behind the table for a few minutes with my fluorescent trousers. Hello, everybody. I don't think everybody's here yet. I don't know if they are, but there's some seats with napkins on them, so I think that means more people are coming. So I won't get into anything much until everybody shows up and sits on their napkins. I hear there's a few new people here. I'm not sure who you are, but whoever you are, welcome. And I hope you find our workshop this weekend to be useful information for you. If you don't know who we are, this is Ashanadine and Azertandine, or Asa, as everybody calls him. And we are here to begin part one of a three-part workshop series. It doesn't mean you have to take all three parts, but this is a place to start anyway. We are in an interesting time on our planet where there are a lot of things that are taking place now in energy terms that most people aren't aware of. If you've been with us for a while, you probably know what a lot of those things are and probably wish you didn't know half of what they are. There are a lot of big changes happening in the planetary body itself and also within the solar body and within our solar system and galaxy. But when it comes down to it, we're people walking around on this planet just trying to do the best we can with what we've got, whatever that is, and first of all, trying to find out what that might be. One of the most misunderstood parts of our experience down here in three-dimensional earthly reality of this time is the area of human experience that is often called the S word, sexuality. What is this? Why is it important? And if you're a person on a spiritual path looking for spiritual answers, why should you care? The answer to that question is you should care very much, because sexuality and spirituality are intimately intertwined, and those things cannot be separated. There have been belief systems on this planet for a very long time that have tried to help us to believe that the body itself was evil and ungodly, and that the spirit was something separate and different from the body. We were taught things of ascension, where you could leave your body behind and go home with God, as if God wouldn't accept your body because your body was bad and you, as a spirit, were good. There have been belief systems and teachings on this planet that were distortions of the natural, original teachings about spirit. The distortions have taught us that sexuality is, if it has any good purpose at all, is for one thing, procreation, making more people. And that has been in a lot of the traditions have taught that. There have been other traditions, however, such as Hinduism, that have actually tried to bring back some of the old teachings that taught about the sacred aspects of sexuality. There's books like the Kama Sutra and that kind of thing that teach you about the external applications of internal energy fields. And unfortunately, those books miss the point too. They teach you how to play with parts without teaching you what the parts are connected to. Now, there is a place where God, spirit, and sexuality and you meet. And that place is in your body, but not just your physical body. It's in your light body. Those of you who have been with us for a while will know when I talk about light body, I'm not using that term lightly or vaguely. I'm not using it in terms of a four-body system. You have mental, emotional, spiritual, and whatever the other one is when they do that one. We don't teach the four-body system. We teach the many-light-body system. We teach the teachings from the core, which is called the star-born cycle. Now, there's an intimate connection between what is called the star-born first creation cycle, which is the eternal life cycle. It is the process by which the cosmos, the manifest cosmos itself, was created. There's a total connection between that process and the process by which you were created, but also the processes that take place within your body all of the time, and particularly when your body is engaged in the activities that we have come to call sexuality here on this planet. There are parts of our light body that express directly through the physical body at all times, but particularly when the procreative parts of the physical body are brought into play. In understanding our relationship with spirit, which we have begun to do for the last 5 years, we've been teaching piece by piece the intricate relationships between a being here in manifestation and eternal source. And it is a beautiful relationship with many different aspects of anatomy to understand, multidimensional physics to understand, but you don't have to understand all of it. But you do need to understand that you're much bigger than what you see when you look in the mirror, that you your body, when I speak of your body, I try to qualify whether I'm speaking about your physical body alone or your entire body, because your entire body has many, many, many light cells. And I'm not talking little cells. I'm talking about huge cells that are the size of buildings. We walk around within this light body structure. And whenever we engage in any activity down here, it's not as if we walk away from our light body structure and then come back when we're done. Whatever we do it with this anatomy intact and with us. Now, there are certain functions in the light body structure, the processes by which creation was originally set in motion and is perpetually recreated while we are in a perpetual motion universe, that have to do with what's called the starborn budding cycle. Now, budding is the first way, the eternal way of procreation. It is the way Source created manifest creation and set it in motion as an eternal life creation system that was capable of regenerating itself continually as long as backflow to Source was circulating. Now, we have our bodies and our light bodies here, and we have our direct connection to Source, which is like a very large, let's say, energy field, and we are a little tiny energy field that exists within that large energy field. If we can begin to understand that beginning, right there, that we're not separate from Source at all, that there is no place to be separate from Source, because all manifestation takes place within the body of Source, within the manifest light body of Source. First of all, you understand something. You can never be alone, and that means even when you think you are, or if you think you are with a partner, there's always somebody there, at least Source is there with you. When we begin to understand ourselves down here, and we begin to ask questions about very practical 3D things, like, mating, relationships, sexuality. Some people love it, some people hate it, and there's a lot of people in between. There's a lot of confusion about it. If we can begin to understand what is this S word down here in relation to the other S word that feels like it's up there, the other S word being spirit, right? It is an intimate energy relationship at all times. And what is really, really sad on this planet is the understanding of that relationship has been so perverted, twisted, and used against the populations here. And this was done on purpose. It was done since the Atlantean periods to literally take hold of the breeding abilities to generate head count of bodies that could be manipulated on a planet that was under siege. We are the product of that siege from Atlantis. And we also carry with us a healing potential where we can, despite whatever nonsense we've been fed through whatever belief systems. I mean, it's kind of funny because if you were Christian or Jewish or Muslim or Hindu, it doesn't matter. Buddha, it doesn't matter. Because at some point or other, we probably were one of those. Whatever lifetime, we probably studied one of those. So you might be Jewish this time. You might have been Palestinian last time. You might be, you will have the distortion filters, but also the elements of truth that all of the religions or religions have brought to us since Atlantis. But behind that, and originally and in your core, what you have is the actual truth of what takes place with these energies of spirit and sexuality. Why sexuality is important when we're beginning to understand spirit, if ascension is what our objective is to do, is because sexuality is directly connected to something called the elemental force. This has to do with what's called the elemental kingdom. When we think of elements, what are elements? What are elementals? Oh, that was a big question. When we should see the information we're starting to get on that one. These are fields of consciousness. They are created, the elemental kingdoms are created through the star-born process. If you think of a hydrogen atom, for example, right? People think, well, it's an atom, right, of hydrogen. It's a gas. It's an atom of gas, right? It is a consciousness. It is a piece of consciousness. And if you think of every hydrogen atom in the entire manifest universe and realize they all talk to each other continually, they are an entity. That will give you a bit of an idea of the beginning of what an elemental is. We are made of them. Our bodies are composed of them. And they are not just inert pieces of matter that are not conscious. They are little units, just like we are little units of God's source. they are little units of God's source that are part of a larger family of consciousness, let's say, that's called the hydrogen family or the oxygen family or whatever, just like we're part of a family of consciousness in the different levels of identity that take us back up to our full identity to source. So as we look at one aspect here, we got elementals, and this has something to do with mastering your body so you can get your chakras and your DNA to do what it needs to do in order to turn back into light so you can ascend through a stargate and go into ascension. You need to understand elementals to do this, because it is the elementals in your body that have been actually holding you here, because they have been harnessed by certain forces that weren't meant to be here. There is a natural elemental relationship that a consciousness coming into a body, a Christic consciousness coming in, would arrange the elemental consciousness and work with it in a Christic way that would allow ascension as easy as breathing. Ascension is supposed to be a natural way of being. It is the natural creation pattern for angelic humans and for many other life forms. The only reason we've lost it on this planet is because there have been environmental influences that I won't go into here, but we'll go into probably in the Phoenix Workshop more, that have distorted what the elemental consciousness can do and have distorted what our bodies can do because of that elemental distortion. The elemental kingdoms are not any happier about this than we are, because they are stuck and harnessed too. And we have the ability to work directly and consciously with these massive universal forces. I mean, think of every hydrogen atom there might be in the entire manifest cosmos. That's a lot. There are a lot of them. If you looked at each one of those as a being, as a person, just the family of hydrogen, you're dealing with a lot of people there. If you think about things like water, which your body is, what, at least 70-something% made of water? And that's H2O. That's 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen, right? So we've got like families helping each other here to build certain matter constructs. As we learn to communicate with the elemental structures that our bodies, our cells, our atoms are made of, we can begin to assist them, and they can assist us in freeing the DNA mutation that has been caused by the environmental forces on this planet that have to do with the fact that we have an equinox and that our planetary axis is tilted at the wrong direction in relation to the natural axis of the sun. I mean, there are big environmental issues that have caused the problems on this planet. And they go right down into the structure and the function of your own light body, what it can do. Can it do what it was built to do in the first place, what it was designed to do? Or is it being harnessed in a way that it can't fulfill its natural imprint, which is to be able to ascend and descend back into matter at will, ascend back into at one minute with God's source and out of manifestation and back in at will? We're supposed to have this as natural abilities. That was one of the gifts of free will that Source gave to us. We had free will and eternal life. It wasn't here, you're created, go away, and kicked us out and we couldn't come back. It was being created in the image of Source. And Source is a consciousness field that when it manifests, it forms a structure of light and sound that progressively builds into what becomes matter. So we are supposed to have a small microcosmic version of that larger source body. Our elements that we are made of are trapped right now, and we have the ability to begin freeing them and learning about the starborn cycle that some of you already know what that is. And if you're just coming to these workshops, it will be new to you, but you'll get a quick rundown during the weekend about what I'm talking about with the starborn cycle. You'll also get some more information on what we call the tachyon cycle. Now, for those of you who have been with us, you probably know that that started in Tenerife, basically, when we had that workshop in February. And boy, was that complicated material. I remember going, oh, no, I got to teach this. I haven't even learned it yet. This is hard, right? It actually isn't once you bring it down. And what we've been doing progressively before, in preparation for this workshop, and I kept saying, what does this have to do with sex? What does this have to do with sex? They said we were going to teach a sex workshop. That they want to know about spirit and sex. You're having me do diagrams about tachyons and tachyon cycles. I don't understand, but I trust you. Once again, I won't know what I'm teaching until probably 10 minutes before I'm supposed to teach it. And it's been one of those where progressively the things I've been preparing, I was like, well, yeah, we need that. And eventually that will be good to present. But what does that have to do with this workshop? Well, I started to get a hint of that this afternoon. Okay, we need to understand tachyon cycles, because tachyon cycles will teach us about keys, like those keys of Enoch and the keys of Nonok and all those kind of things. What are keys? What are harmonic keys? What do they have to do with matter? What do these have to do with chakras? And what do chakras have to do with putting your parts together down here? And how come sometimes it makes babies and sometimes it just makes whoopee? And what does all this have to do with each other? All of these pieces are connected. What we're going to have as far as the probably tomorrow's workshop, because tonight we're just doing the orientation. Tomorrow's workshop will start at 3. We'll run from 3 to 7, take a dinner break from 7 to 9, and then come back from 9 to 11-ish, depending how far it runs. We'll try to keep you up forever. The reason we have to start late is because we're getting live transmission again, so I will be in transmission all night tonight and all day, putting this new material together that all the graphs I've got ready that have to do with tachyons and the starborn cycle and those kind of things. They're going to be taken to the next level, and they're plugging them into another part of this, the anatomy. That was another one of those where I went, oh no, which was the Ruchete spiral. And any of you who studied with us about that was another one of, like, when they introduced tachyons, like, oh my God, that stuff's hard, right? Here is this, way back in the English workshop. What year was that? The year before the Michael Maryline workshop. They began introducing the Ruchete spiral information. And I remember trying to do these diagrams going, oh my God, how does this work? So they took some of the two hardest things as far as what diagrams I have not had prepared at all. Yeah, they still have like mylar spots all over them. They're a mess. I've been cleaning these up, and now they're showing me why, because they go together with when you get into tachyon, starborn cycle, and the Ruchete spiral, and you find out what that has to do with the currents that are running down your central vertical column, and you find out what that has to do with your chakras and how they're supposed to be functioning and how energy is supposed to be moving back and forth and circulating naturally. And when you bring those natural energy systems together in terms of your light body anatomy, and you look at it in terms of things like sexuality. What is it? For instance, what is an orgasm? Everybody seems to want one. Everybody's trying to get one or make somebody else have one. What is this thing? I think it's like an actually. Referring to light. Ja referring to certain levels of the light body structure, and referring to the flame at the center of the creation point. But we have all sorts of things involving orgasms. Some people have them freely, naturally. Some people just have to think about it, and they can go off and just like smile back in the corner, and nobody notices. Other people, you can turn yourself inside out, and the body just doesn't do that. There's a lot of people in between. There's a lot of different ideas that we carry and filters that we carry from different karmic periods. Now, if you've not been with us for a long time, when I talk about your minimum of 1,727 other selves that your existence implies, I know, other selves. Yes, that you imply, right? Yeah, that makes 1728, right? Right? Which means you have 1,727 other cells running around in different space-time zones at the same time as you are right now. They have their own ideas and relationships and misunderstandings and understandings about sexuality and spirit and energy running. We will have a bunch of filters that are actually stored in electromagnetic form within different parts of our light body anatomy that will directly affect how our bodies and our elemental kingdoms in our bodies can function in relation to the S word. If we were raised in a very fundamental type of religious background that was very polarized in good versus bad, good versus evil, and the body ended up on the bad side, we can have a lot of hang-ups where sexuality is concerned, where we can feel it's dirty or it's bad. And for ages, our cultures, particularly in America, and I think in a lot of Europe as well, has taught that, it's still like the S word, you know what I mean? Because you put EX behind it and people think you're talking about something dirty. There's still all these references to sex being dirty, to sexuality being dirty, and very little references to it being sacred. You can turn on the TV and find these horrid porn channels that, if anything, makes me want to scream. It's those, because you watch men and women humiliate themselves and act out things that are just about bodies, because nobody remembers anymore that it was supposed to be about spirits coming together as well as bodies coming together. And everybody seems to be chasing the ever elusive or not so elusive orgasm, and that seems to be what everybody thinks sex is all about. And it's really a shame because it isn't. Sex has been used on this planet for a long time now to exploit other people, and for other people that aren't here to exploit human beings, both males and females, in the bodies. We can learn to see through these filters to get a clear space. If we have an aversion to sexuality, there's a good reason for it. There's been a lot of misuse and abuse of sexuality here. If you happen to have any Nibiru in history where you were a female angelic human and you got kidnapped from here and taken to Nibiru and used as breeding machines, you will probably have a very, very strong block when it comes to, I will never, ever, ever have one of those things. I'm going to keep my oars to myself no matter what you do to me, right? To the point where even if you want to, you may find that doesn't happen, right? You may also have other types of filters which go in the opposite direction, where you learned that it was a way to get energy. And in a positive sense, it is a way for people to share energy with each other, but it's not meant to be a vampiring of energy from another. But a lot of people carry filters, biological filters, where their elemental kingdom within themselves is actually preying on the elemental kingdom in other people. And it's not just males chasing females, it's also females chasing males, where sexuality is being abused. And a lot of people just kind of, they're being run around by their fairy moons, which are the pheromones, of course. Right? Yeah. We'll get into fairies and elementals later. But what are these things called pheromones, these chemicals that cause attraction, that if you watch in animals, I mean, we have these lovely kitties, little kittens, and they just kind of became a year old. And even our sweet little precious kittens, and there's no male kitten in the house, two little girl kitties. When this chemical thing happens, these cats turn inside out. And you just look at them and they go, oh, and they roll on their back like, pat me, touch me, you know. And you just watch this thing and think, wow, humans are dealing with this too. You know, you might not get that bad where you drop in the street and roll around and howl. But just about. I mean, how much of human life is spent about trying to get into relationships, trying to do something with relationships, trying to find one, trying to get rid of one, trying to get a new one? I mean, what is this relationship stuff? Some people, it is a heart connection. But you know what's really funny? You'll find out when we learn a bit more about the chakras, that love thing where you forget you have anything below the belt. And you don't really have a sex drive, but you have a love drive and a bonding drive, and you want to bond, and you're looking for that mate, that one person, whatever, right? That's actually the same thing. You're just having a heartgasm instead of a, right? And it can be as misleading, chemically misleading, as can the other kind be. Now, and it tends to be people who run more ira energy tend to have heartgasms much easier, and people who run more mane energy, which would be the base electrical versus the base magnetic, which is the ira, they would run more of the lower chakra orgasms. And when you put them in, now that doesn't necessarily mean men will run more, men being mane dominant will run more than, more in the lower chakras than females. It tends to be a pattern, but not all males are mane dominant. Some are ira dominant, which are technically females in male bodies. And they would actually have their energy running, they'd have more heartgasms than the lower gasms. So there's all these different things that have to do with your light body and God's source and your ability to ascend and first creation and bring it all the way down your Rishite spiral right down here into your chakras, including your base chakra. And it comes out into what we call these urges or lack of urges, these things that our science tells us here are chemically controlled. Well, yes, they are, but where do those chemicals come from is what science is not yet looking at or for. And that is where the answers actually lie. Yes, there are things called fairy moons or pheromones that do have a lot to do with attraction between males and females. They are connected to mating, but they are not just mating for procreation, but they are not just about the urge to procreate. And some of the theories that science comes up with are really hilarious about why certain attractions are there. Like why, let's say, I remember seeing this on TV somewhere, where women with certain facial features, eyes spaced this far apart, nose this far down. These are considered more attractive because it has to do with mating and who is most potentially can produce the best offspring. Yeah, right. That might be a little part of it. That might be like a little caveman aspect of it, but it is certainly not the whole thing or what all of this attraction thing is about. By the end of this workshop, at least, I hope that we will be able to understand a little bit better. First of all, what are these parts that we've got here? We know the outside words for them, but what are they really? What are those things between our legs? What do they do? Why do we have such issues and stigmas attached to them in this culture? And why do males and females so often speak two different languages using the same words and can't understand each other and end up in these power struggles and these dramas, these control dramas with each other, over each other, when all they really wanted to do was have a love relationship and have a partner and feel good? There's a lot of distortion in the male-female relationship. There's a lot of distortion on this planet in belief systems that tell you what males are supposed to do and what females are supposed to do and what they're not. And at this point, if you want to become free, you need to throw them all in the garbage. You are a spiritual being first, and so is whoever your partner is. Throw out whatever roles your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, or any of the prophets from 1,000 years ago might have told you what a guy was supposed to do and what a girl was supposed to do. Because girls can be steel workers, and guys can be ballerinas, and everything in between. And when it comes to little things in a relationship, if you're living with someone, be they the same sex or the opposite sex, when it comes to little things like, well, you got to do all the cooking because you're the female, and that's a female job. Oh, really? Right. Well, thank God Haas didn't think so, because we would have both starved to death. Right? But yes, but I'm very good at cleaning. Right? So we have a very clean house, and we eat. Right? However, there's a lot of things that we really just need to get out of the way to start fresh, where we can begin to build a sacred relationship with sexuality itself. It starts with, before we worry about combining it in coupling, which we'll get to the point of the third installment workshop, will be much more on when you are in coupling, and probably have a little, not Karma Sutra, but a little kind of things that help you. We're not going to do it here or there, but we're going to tell you, you might want to try this at home, right? If you happen to be in a relationship. Before you can worry about coupling, before you worry about procreating and making more of you and your coupled self, right? You need to understand your first sexual relationship, and that's with you, yourself, and God. And that's what this workshop is going to begin. We're going to begin to understand more about the chakra system, and particularly it in relation to the sexual parts here. We're going to begin to understand more about the Rushite spiral, the currents that run down the center of the body, and their connection to tachyon cycles and harmonic key generation and all of those things associated with ascension. And we're going to bring them together, hopefully, in a way, because I'm learning this too, by the way. I'm learning all of this, and I remember that. Anyway, I'll say that after I say this. Finish myself first. After we get to understand a bit more of the spirit and its connection to the technical parts of the flesh and the energy light body parts that are connected to the flesh, we can then begin to look at a little bit of the distortion factors and how to start clearing them. It has to do with what's called the crystal connection, and this has to do with something called the crystal spiral. If you've been with us for a while, you know the difference between the crystal spiral and the golden meanie spiral, which these have to do with the starborn cycle and first creation physics. We're going to learn a bit about what this has to do with the formation of atoms and how atoms function, and how on this planet, because of certain distortions in the planetary electromagnetic fields that are quite severe, we have distortions in our atoms that create chemicals that weren't meant to be created, that distort the natural fairy moons into pheromones that go preying on each other all over the place, and you find yourself woke up in the morning looking at what's next to you and going, oh my gosh, what did I do? What was I thinking? I wasn't. That was the problem. You know, you can have those times. There is a lot going on with sexual chaos on this planet, And when we bring the sex word into what it really is about, it's about combining of energy fields. If you have to understand what your energy field is itself first before you can understand whether you're combining it in a good way or not a good way. And if you can understand that it isn't an evil, bad part of you, in fact, it's a part of you that if you plan to ever ascend or walk through a stargate, which is the same thing, well, almost the same thing. You can walk through a stargate and not ascend as well, but to get into ascension, you must go through stargates. If you're going to do that, you need to incorporate your elemental consciousness, and that is the consciousness of your hydrogen, your oxygen, all of those atoms that create a consciousness field that you are walking around and co-creating with right now. And it's a part of ourselves that because of the mutation on this planet, we've actually been cut off from. I don't know how many people feel it, but I've gone through it. Might be because I am a walk-in, and I've had to do the extra, like I got in this far, and it's like, hello down there. I know there's chakras down there theoretically, right? There's legs down there too, have to walk. But most people don't have that severe of a disconnection from the elemental levels. The elementals go with the D2 level frequencies in the body, but there are also higher elemental levels that go with the different levels. You may feel completely, if you got sick, would you be able to say, okay, body, we're going to fix this? Yeah, go fix it. Or would you, oh my God, I feel terrible. Run to the doctor, get something to fix it, because you don't have any elemental command, right? If we had elemental command at our disposal right now, we would not be ill. We would not get sick. We would not have cancers. We would not have those problems. We don't have elemental command on a mental conscious level right now because of the DNA mutations that actually make certain chemical combinations that are supposed to be there naturally that would create natural chemical communication between your 3D mental body, mind, conscious self, and the conscious self of you that is the elemental part of yourself. You would naturally be able to communicate chemically, and you have open communication with all the atoms in your body at any time. Beginning to get elemental command back means clearing that artificial barrier that was caused by the mutation. The beginning of that is first understanding how things are supposed to function. What is this anatomy and how does it work? I'm just getting this afternoon, I started getting the diagrams that began to show. It's really funny because if anybody went up and saw in the room, I have all these little doodles all over the place. That's where all the diagrams start. And they would think I was like rather porn obsessed because we have little penises over here and little vaginas over here. And, right? Well, they're part of it. They're energy systems. They're the manifest carriers of these energies. And we had to find where the light body stuff fit in relation to those. So we're going to find out this. I have a whole bunch of drawings I have to do now because they're just starting to show me this stuff. I'm going, oh boy, here we go. Right? So we will find out more about what's in those parts down there. And once you find out more about what's in them, you get a better idea of what you can do with them and what's probably not a good idea to do with them. You'll find out all sorts of things, too, when we start to understand how the chakras are supposed to function and the natural things that are supposed to be able to happen, even with yourself. First of all, it is not a bad thing for people who have a sex urge. We'll find out, hopefully, a bit more about what is that urge anyway, right? Why some have it, why don't. But it's not bad to take care of that yourself. That's not evil. You're not going to grow hair on your palms, right? God does not get mad at you and put you in a corner of the universe for 20 years. It can be used actually for advantage, but it can also be abused, and you can harm yourself, not necessarily on the outside, but it's not always a good thing to do. But it's not always not a good thing to do either. There are times when sexual stimulation is good for you, and there are times when it isn't good for you. And that depends. And there are also combinations where it's good for you and where it's not good for you. Potential partners that are good for you and not good for you. And vice versa. Might not be good for them either. But we will learn a little bit more, at least, during this workshop about what are these parts? What is the light body correspondent to these parts? When a person has an orgasm, be they male or female, what is that exactly? What is that boom that comes out? Because a lot of people really, well, at least if you see those porn channels and stuff fly by, they're always moaning, groaning, and howling. It's like, and my cats certainly do it all by themselves. They're very turned on. I fit into a particular gender that's called asexual, and that's I just kind of scratch my head and go, gosh, I wish I could do that. Right? But you'll find a little bit more out about what the parts are. What are the energies running? How is it supposed to work naturally? So this workshop will focus more on understanding the metaphysics of sexuality, which has to do with understanding a bit more of the anatomy. We'll go through the most important aspects of the starborn cycle and tachyon cycle into the light body structure. We're not going to go through the whole thing because most of the people here have been through the whole thing quite a few times. But we'll give enough for the people that are new. You can at least hopefully see where this light body came from, first creation point, how this light body that we talk about was built, emerged from there, and how this is the body that has all sorts of aspects of anatomy, part of which are chakras and a Rishite spiral that runs down the center vertical column that is directly the link between you, source, and your sexuality. So if we can put those pieces together on how they're supposed to work. This workshop will focus more on how they are supposed to work in natural order, the natural Christic eternal life pattern. Before you can tell if something is broken, it helps to have an idea of what it looked like before it might have been. And before we talk about the mutations in the chakras and get out the diagrams of the Metatronic spiral and show all the mess, we've been showing enough of the mess already, we're going to look at what the natural structure is supposed to look like, how it's supposed to function. And I've been told Sunday will be when they said, that's technique day. I thought, oh, great. Now, what are the techniques? You'll see. So it's one of those where we will be getting the techniques. I don't know if they will come through live or what, but it's about making the connection. It's about what is it about? It's about, I'm asking them too, because all along I've been saying, what does this have to do with sex? What does this have to do with sex? Finally, they showed me, aha, Rishite spiral is the key to understanding what light body has to do with those parts. Now, there are exercises that have to do with, and I don't think we're going to be doing anything, embarrassing. We'd probably give you those in written form. You could just take them home, and if they're there, they're up to you to play with, because we're not a sex cult. No, thank you. Right? But we're going to learn how to do something with the chakra system that has to do with amplifying the Rishite spiral in a way that it begins to open the natural currents in the natural chakra structures. We've talked briefly about chakras and how when other people teach chakras, they teach you have these, well, usually they show a circle on the front of your body, and some of them at least tell you there's one on the back that corresponds with it. Even some that are more advanced, like Barbara Brennan does a lot of very good work on showing structure and those of etheric bodies and those chakras and those kind of things. She shows you that there are two cones of energy that meet in the center and that kind of thing. But there's supposed to be 4 cones on a horizontal plane and 2 vertical, and our chakras have been shut down and fixated in a certain position to lock in energies in a specific way in order for babies to be created with specific atomic mutations, where we are babies that were created that way as well. Now, we can undo these distortions in the chakra systems. The beginning is being able to run what's called the natural crystal spiral. That's something a lot of people are aspiring to. There's something called the rainbow bridge that was a step before that, which is beginning to be able to pull out of the planetary golden meanie spiral, which is the Metatronic code, or the Fibonacci spiral. Fib of Nochi, we like to call it, because it actually sucks energy from you rather than bringing energy to you. We will begin to work with what is called the crystal connection. I will find out what that is with you, because they haven't told me yet. But it goes this way a lot of the times. For those of you who are old-timers with us, sometimes it shows up half hour before it has to be delivered, and we spend half the night getting it through, if not all night, and then we deliver it next. That's why we already know that for this weekend, we will start at 3, run until 7, and have the dinner break, and then run from like 9 until 11, hopefully. If they happen to give us a download that's worth staying up late for, we will, and it's your option to stay up late or not. But at least we're warning you ahead of time. We used to try to show up at 10 a.m. and have a daytime workshop. I surrender. It just doesn't work that way, because the information is, the next level always comes in during the workshop when the group shield assembles or when we're on the specific grids. And the easiest way is to let you have your time, or you're not waiting, they're not here yet, they're late. No, we won't be late, we just won't be here till 3. All right? So at least that way, we will be on time and you will have your time not hung up waiting for us. But you will get the same amount of hours. They will just be toward the late afternoon and into evening, as opposed to during the daytime. I'm looking forward to seeing where they go with this information, because this one is, for the other 2 workshops that will follow, they have to, one of them is in Phoenix. That one they called Gender Benders, Chakras, and the Rosh Hashanah Reunion. The chakras refers to chakras that have been twisted and distorted. That's where we start to understand a little bit more about what the crystal connection is going to help us purge and what this has to do with our relationships. In this workshop, we'll talk about a bit of relationships in general, about our relationship with ourself is what we bring to any relationship with anyone else, and our relationship with God's source. Be we have one directly, consciously, or not consciously, we still have one. And that we bring to a relationship also. So we'll look at more 3D simple things about relationships and try to understand them a bit energetically in this workshop. And we will take it into understanding more of why relationships have become, particularly between genders, have become so complicated on this planet. Why is there this rift so often between males and females, and sometimes between females and females and males and males as well when it comes to sexuality? There seems to be this stigma to sexuality that it lures you in and then rips you apart. And there's a reason for that, and it goes right down into the mutation that's actually carried in the chakras, in the DNA, and it creates misfiring of energies and miscommunication. These things can be worked through, but in order to, it's like everybody keeps like, change your partner, do-si-do, let's try this one, see if this person can get along with me, see if I can stand this person, if they don't drive me crazy. We can do this forever. You can go through people like tissues, but it's not going to change the fact. It might not have been anything wrong with you or anything wrong with them. It might not have, forget looking for fault, because it's always like, well, I got to end that one. It must have been his fault. It must have been her fault, right? Blame it on the other one. Or if you're a masochist, no, it's my fault. It's always my fault. So the fault is not what it's about. You're missing the point when you're blaming. The fault is like a fault line in the chakras, in the natural energy currents that are supposed to connect in a way that actually builds and creates harmony and unity in a way that your fields can actually go through a level of ascension together, where you can assist yourself in reaching higher states of consciousness. If you aren't able to do that with your own self and your own energy system, even without touching any parts, you're not going to be able to bring that capacity to a relationship. If your elemental kingdom inside of yourself is still functioning in a way, because it doesn't know any better, following the mutation, where it's actually trying to suck energy from other people because it feels starved, because the mutation makes the elemental kingdom in the body and the body itself feel starved. Starved of love, starved of food, starved of energy, because it is not, the light body is not functioning as it should in order to regenerate its currents. And the body has a resistance to death. And if the light body cannot function properly over a period of time, the body does die, because the cells do not receive enough sparks of radiation or electrical radiation to keep them self-regenerating. And the sex drive right now has been actually turned into almost like the same kind of desperation, where the elemental kingdom in our bodies has this desperation attached to sexuality as a potential way of feeding when it feels like it's dying, because it can't make a connection. The elementals, you might not feel this way. Your 3D mind may say, well, I'm beyond that. But, I might even remember when, I felt lost and used to try to, find other people to, take care of me before I made my relationship with Source. You might have got through that mentally, but your emotional elemental body is still carrying that need, because it needs to be put online with your connection that you may have consciously already made with Source, where you don't have to go running for relationships to give you that love feeling or the safety, because you've learned to get it vertically. But your elements have to get it vertically too. They have to connect with your 3D mind, and you have to lead your elements, your elemental kingdoms, your chemicals that are running through the body. These are conscious parts of your anatomy that are parts of vast families of consciousness, like the hydrogen family and the oxygen family, and they turn to you for guidance. What the mutation has done for so long has actually turned the relationship upside down, where it created such an overflow of disharmonic chemicals in the elemental body that it overwhelmed the mental body, where our emotions run us around, where our chemicals run us around, where we become bipolar, where we become sex craved or totally sex aversion, where all these chemical things have been controlling the mind, and that is an inversion of the natural relationship. The mind is supposed to control the emotional body, and the emotional body controls the atomic structure. Now, controlling the emotional body doesn't mean whack, whack. No, you can't feel that way. No, that doesn't work. That old-fashioned way of mind over matter, mind over emotion. No, I will not feel, and the body goes, yes, I do, right? Until it builds up and it blows up someplace, right? And it comes out in a temper tantrum, or you accidentally killed somebody because you lost control of yourself. There's an inversion right now that we need to heal in the relationship between the mental body, which is the D3, mental body, and the D2, emotional, elemental body. And it's not about repressing the emotions. It's about letting them free, but not letting them free reign. A lot of people use as an excuse. The mental body actually will facilitate the mutation by saying, well, I feel it, and therefore I have a right to that. Well, fine. You do have a right to that. But don't you think that you're using that to do some things that are really not fair to other people and really not fair to yourself if you really look at it? You're not meant to just say, okay, well, I feel it, so therefore it's good, and I have a right to that, and if it hurts other people, that's too bad, and if it's not good for me, well, that's tough because I'm just fulfilling myself. You need to learn to have a relationship with the elemental kingdom in two ways. One, what you call the part of the mental kingdom that you would call your emotional body is a part that's directly connected to you, that actually has an imprint of stuff that at some point was a thought that stepped down into the elemental kingdom that was associated with your body energy systems and outpictured itself in certain chemical forms that were directly related to you. Others are much broader. The other part of the elemental kingdom in the body is much broader, and you have to have a different relationship with both parts. The parts that is your little elemental self is the part that you need to treat like a child or a young adolescent that is coming into its own power, but it still needs discretion on where it's going to put that power. It may feel surges of anger, of sadness, of happiness, of joy, of elation. All of these things may surge through once you give it permission to feel. And what you don't want to do is have the rest of yourself, and probably your family and anybody connected to you, dragged around by those bursts of chemical processing that the elemental part of yourself will go through. That's where a conscious 3D mind comes in as a loving guardian. Says, yeah, I acknowledge that feeling. Yeah, I could really do that. But it's probably in our best interest, you and me, emotional body, to take that in a different direction. You can learn to work with your emotional body and elemental kingdom and move it. If you try to repress it, it will build up bigger than you, and it will override, eventually, your mental body, and you'll be in a fight constantly with yourself and with your body. You need to be friends with your emotional body, but you also need to be a loving friend and say, well, from the D3 level here, my mental body is on D3, and right now I'm talking to you on D2. We each see something a little differently, but I do think we need to guide this way. You need to negotiate sometimes with that part of yourself that is called the emotional body. You don't want to repress it, but you don't want to let it run you rampant. The reason it would even do that right now is because of the elemental kingdom on the planet having a mutation that is being carried because of the distortion in the planetary fields. There will be unnatural energy combinations of frequency coming up into the telluric or the elemental kingdom from those distortions in the planetary body. They will, as they outpicture, create inorganic and unnatural chemical formations within the manifest body structure, and your emotional body will be being dragged around by those. It's like watching a child be dragged around by other children. Some of them are nice and some of them are malicious. It's like watching a child be stuck in a fight between a malicious group and a group that's trying to protect it, and the child doesn't know who to trust or which way to go. So your emotional body needs your help. Your elemental kingdom within yourself needs your help. That's the small part, the immediate personal part of your elemental force within your body. Now that force is what gives you the ability to connect to the bigger elemental force of the universe. And that's where you can begin to meet the family of hydrogen or oxygen or whatever. But you can begin to meet these very, very eternal, noble consciousness fields that carry vast amounts of data. And you can begin to co-create with them. These you don't tell them what to do. But you ask them if they would co-create with you. And when you establish a good relationship with elemental command, It means the elements as consciousness will choose to work with you. And if you say, would you send wind, please? The wind will come. If you say, heal that, please, it will. There is a power that is in manifest reality. The highest power in a manifest form you can have is the power of elemental command. And it is not a power that you wear as a badge and use that and go, boss the elements around. Because they'll laugh at you and they'll flatten you. Seriously. If you think you're going to go up there and say, I said rain. You just see the elementals going, okay. Here comes the flood. You know what I mean? You're going, I didn't mean that much. As you're drowning. There is a respectful relationship where you got to realize, just like your emotional body, your immediate elemental emotional body, needs to recognize that you are the big consciousness here, that it will work with you. You're not going to repress it or dominate it. You'll be fair to it and do what's right, and always try to help it have what it feels it needs. But your emotional body is going to listen to you. You need to have a similar relationship with the elemental kingdoms, the big ones, the ones that are the consciousness fields of the atoms themselves, because they are very intelligent and they hold the secrets to the universe. And they will gladly work with you if you are choosing to create something that is in your best interest and the best interest of others. They will, some of them that are mutated themselves, that are caught in the planetary mutation, will actually, certain people command them in the wrong way, where they will actually harness aspects of them, cut the elementals off from their larger consciousness families and distort them and send them to do things. And there are people on this planet who do that. They do it consciously. They play occult games. We call them the occults, and they like to use sex magic and all sorts of things to abuse the elemental command. They don't have elemental command. What they have is elemental hijack, and that can only go so far. When you go into true elemental command, it's a mutually respectful relationship. The elemental kingdoms, the large ones, the eternal ones, will respect you if you approach them with respect, and they will love you if you approach them with love, and they will co-create with you, and they will do it gladly, and they'll teach you many things about how to do that the right way. But if you try to abuse them, only the certain local ones that are trapped right now within a larger harnessing net of the planetary electromagnetic fields will actually work against, a Christic being. The other ones won't. We are on a planet right now that is caught between what is going to be an elemental war, actually. The Christic elemental kingdoms that are the eternal ones, that are not mutated, that are free from the mutation, they will stand and hold the eternal, what's called encryption, the eternal encryption. They will not allow themselves to be taken into misuse or abuse. But certain parts of the planetary body are ensnared in a mutation of elemental command. It's an elemental mini-command. So you will have elemental forces and the forms that they make. And here's where you get everything from goblins to fairies and all sorts of other life form structures. See, these are part of elemental command too. There are good fairies and bad fairies. There are happy trolls and not happy trolls. There are two elemental forces. There is only one, really, but there is a part of it that has been harnessed and compromised. And right now on this planet, you have both working. But the one that is largest is connected to what is called the original encryption or name of this planet, which was Eartha. We are being invited to learn and to establish a relationship with the Eartha elemental command, which is the large one, the eternal life one. The ones that are associated with what is called the earth body, which has to do with something, if you've been with us before, you know the difference between the Amente rescue mission that has to do with the name Earth and the Eartha original body of this planet, that a certain portion of another planet called Terra was brought into to try to heal it and bring it back together. We have the Earth command and we have the Eartha command. The Eartha command is the large one and the eternal one. The Eartha command's hydrogen family, for example, is connected to every other living hydrogen family in the entire manifest cosmos, where, say, a mutated part of that might be associated with the Earth fields alone will only have itself to communicate with and any other one that shares that mutation. But the large eternal life fields of consciousness of the elementals are connected with the eartha body. They can't be compromised. And it was really the choice of those consciousness fields and those who work with them, that are beyond human form, that work with them, that decided we had enough potential to invite us to relearn what it means to have that kind of relationship. And that's really, really special, to receive back what's it used to come. We used to know this. It used to be our natural relationship with the elements of, with elements, plants, animals, everything. We had open, direct cognition, full, it's absolute love. It's just the most amazing state. That was our natural condition. We are a long way off from that condition right now because of the mutation that's carried on this planet and in the DNA. But we can begin to work ourselves back from it. The first part is getting reacquainted with our elementals and getting reacquainted with the elemental force as it moves through our bodies, both the elemental force of Earth, which can carry mutations in chemical form that you will feel and that run through your body and try to control and direct its energy through the emotional body. Or we can work with the other underlying stronger force and reawaken it, which is the eartha force, that can help to heal the parts of ourselves that are carrying the earth mutations. And we will begin to understand through this workshop anyway, the beginning of the relationship between God, Source, Self, and sexuality. And once we begin to embrace more of what that means, where it's every time you have sex, even in your head, even if you're not touching any parts, even if you don't have a partner with you, you are engaging in an act of creation of something. It might be something good, and it might be something you didn't mean to create and didn't realize you were. We're going to learn about the energies that we are running when we are feeling those things we call emotion and sexuality, and its connection to the elementals within us and the larger elementals around us. Because that will give us a base to later understand more about what the mutation is and what needs to progressively be fixed to return us to that natural state of innocence, of absolute love, where there was just openness with all things, and there was none of this power struggle nonsense going on, not just between males and females, but between elemental kingdoms of mutation versus non-mutation. There is a point of healing that we may not experience in this particular lifetime on this planet, but we can begin the process of healing it in ourselves, to begin bringing more and more of the return to the state before that mutation occurred. We can begin bringing that into our bodies, in our elemental state. And what it will do is prepare us for something that has to do with time travel. Believe it or not. Yes, even sex even has to do with time travel. It's not even a leap. Well, it is a leap, but as far as, when I say time travel, that's what ascension is. If you are on a planet, let's say, that is going to encounter at some point an evolutionary deviation from its original path of ascension, and you don't want to be on that planet when it does its deviation, and you'd like to go to a planet or a version of the planet that is in a space-time frame where it is still an ascension planet, where it is still a possibility to have the natural Christic or eternal life order back in the body, and to grow to become part of societies that are functioning on Christic principle. We can begin the process of aligning our bodies with places like that. There is a place that is in the same place as Earth, and it is called Eartha. If we looked at it in energy terms, you could imagine Eartha as a huge sphere of energy with part of its layers manifest, which would be physically experienced as manifest. And then inside of that, there's a smaller one, a smaller sphere of energy that was hosted in an attempt to heal it. And that one is called Earth. We are on Earth. In our atmosphere, there is something called the Aurora bands. And beyond the Aurora bands, in what our science, if you send a spaceship out right now, out to the moon and look back, and what would be our atmosphere going from the surface of Earth outward, out to the magnetosphere. In those areas and extending beyond them, there is an entire other reality band that is called the Eartha band. It is right here with us. But it has not been somewhere we could go while we're holding the mutation. The gates of Eartha are being opened by the races, of the Christic races of consciousness who are there. They are being assisted by groups called the Aurora races, who are the ones who control the gateways that run through these particular electromagnetic bands that are in Earth's atmosphere that will allow certain rotations of angular rotation of particle spin to occur. So beings from here, if they can shift out of their elemental mutation enough, can actually begin to go in and experience. It'd be like walking up into a hole in the sky and walking out and realizing you came out of a cave and you're on a planet that's bigger, that's more pristine and perfect, that's running in a different time band, but it's in the same place. This is what they're preparing those of us who want to go that far for. For others, we'll just learn how to have much more fulfilling sexual relationships while we're here. But these things are all connected. There is something, once we understand our relationship between our sexual energies and our elemental energies as they run in our bodies here, and our relationship to Source, and God's Source, and to our light body, we'll become more conscious of what we can do with our bodies, both ourselves or with a partner. We can realize that there's certain ways you can actually amplify or you can use sexual energies to heal. And that doesn't mean go get laid. No, it doesn't mean those things. It means you can learn to, if your body is one of those that likes to orgasm, you can actually yourself bring it to that state and collect that energy. Usually people orgasm and it goes all over the place. If you looked at it in the auric field, it's like, you have to go. Okay. It's like fireworks, right? Well, that's one way to do it. And that's one way most people that don't realize there's another way to do it. And there's nothing wrong with it except you lose that energy, right? It went off into the fields. And if you happen to be with somebody else, they might have sucked it into their fields. But whatever it is, you lost a quantum of energy. You just blew a quantum out, and it went elsewhere, out into your field someplace. There are ways to actually take that and pull it up higher and move it. Or put it in a collection zone where you can put it over here, like collect it here, and put it over here, and then draw it back when you need it for something like healing or manifesting. There are positive ways to use sexual energy for manifesting in things that are, when you look at certain groups use black arts and occult stuff to use sex energy. You know, they'll have like sex and do orgies and all that stuff to get the energy flowing and all that stuff. They're trying to get something flowing, obviously, right? And then they use it and try to direct it to invoke nasty powers and those kind of things. That's a perversion of the natural things that you can do when you're working with Christic energies in your sexual energies. You have the ability to generate sexual energy in the body. Now, this is a chemical reaction in the body, but it's much more than chemical. It's a radiation reaction in the body. You are creating sparks. You are creating quarks, and quarks are what build atoms and molecules and things. You can learn to work with your elemental command, with your sparks and your quarks. You can learn to breathe in certain ways when, say, you're engaging sexuality. That can help heal your DNA faster. That can help heal someone else if you're trying to assist them in healing. That can help you manifest something. There's lots of little tricks you can do. Like you can, there were lifetimes where I remember knowing how to do this. And I really wish I had a body that was of that ran a bit more of those currents this time, because I sit there and go, gee, I remember that. but my body orientation is a little bit different. But you can generate sexual energy in a positive way. And like always, with your dial up, clear your lines first and dedicate it always to Source. Directly to Source, and be with me, Source. Source is always with you, but open the lines directly, like mentally. Always invite God's Source in. Not any other little names. Don't call God this, that, or the other thing. Just original first creation Source behind the door of manifestation. The original Source we all came out of. Let that consciousness be with you. And don't let others come in, right? Don't invite the angels in whatever you do. Because angels will come in, and a lot of them won't be nice, and they will actually engage you and do certain things, and you will feel them touch your physical bodies as well. And they can even get you pregnant if you're a girl. And this is not usually a good thing, and they're not usually angels that are doing it, just so you know. But you can do good things with your own sexual energy before you worry about coupling it with somebody else's, which is nothing wrong with doing, but with your own self, you can learn to run that energy in specific ways. You can learn to capture the energy of orgasm and move it up into different areas of the body and envision and move it up, say, to the heart chakra, then move it up here into the sixth chakra, and then envision something you're trying to manifest that's good. And then instead of blowing it out your bottom chakra, blow it out your third eye. into the image you are trying to manifest. There are things, ways you can direct this energy. This energy is just as pure as if Source sent a flame down to you and said, here's a piece of the eternal flame that you can use for manifesting. It is the same energy that you're generating when you're feeling the sexual response in the body. Some of it will have a tinge of the eartha elemental twist to it, and that's the part that we need to learn to direct so it can be healed and brought back into natural alignment. And then it is safe to work with energies. If you're a person who has learned to have this relationship with you, yourself, Source, and sex all at the same time, and you can do it without ever having to touch yourself. If you have an aversion to masturbation, you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to touch yourself physically at all. You don't even have to, you can even close your eyes and pretend you don't have those parts if you have an aversion to those parts. Because some people really do. Some people have not been in these bodies for very long, or they've been in them way too long, and they really just can't stand what's from the waist down anymore because they've experienced what it's like to not have those parts anymore. And there's a real difference. But it doesn't matter what you do with the physical parts there. But you can realize the energy that they generate in the chemical form. Behind those chemicals, there are sparks of divine light, the eternal fire. And you can draw them and collect them and build keys with them. And keys build tachyons. And tachyons build spirals, crystal spirals of energy that you can then use and direct in ways that you can use yourself, or you can directly communicate with elemental command and say, I bring this energy to this. I would like to create this. Would you co-create something with me? What would you like to create? And you can create larger manifestations. You can affect worlds. You can affect groups of people in healthy ways this way by assisting and clearing the mutation in whatever part of the races on this planet that can still shift the mutation. So there are many, many applications where sexuality was always sacred. It was the people on this planet that forgot. It was. And they forgot not because they wanted to. They forgot because they were put in a DNA harness by messing with the electromagnetic fields on this planet, by tilting its axis at an unnatural angle. That knocked out its natural chakra alignments, which knocked out the natural electromagnetic relationships in the DNA, which caused the DNA to malfunction in a way that it does not make certain chemicals that are essential to run that natural sacred sexual energy. So all of this isn't something that this whole thing with sexuality and all of this that has happened on this planet is a result of not sex being bad, but of a planetary mutation, an environmental influence that has created a chemical deviation in the DNA, and we have the ability to use the mind and the wisdom that is being brought to us now to begin clearing that deviation right at its source in the elemental kingdoms within ourselves. And we will progressively open more and more parts of ourselves to the sacredness of sex. When we start to really feel remember that the sacredness of sexuality, we realize sexuality is something much different than what the illusion out here has tried to tell us it was for so long. Sexuality is about reunion with Source. Sexuality shared between people is about merging of energy fields. If you took, say, a man and a woman, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, whichever, if you took two people in bodies and they were going to engage in an act of passionate sex, right? So over here you have a little picture of two people passionately making love. Their breathing is accelerating, which means their arcs are going faster and faster. Their pillar of power is coming up and down. They're generating more and more sparks, right? Right? It's all connected. Right? Now, if you took the image of those bodies and put that over here and watched the energy, you would be seeing the most beautiful movements of light cells, of light ball. The light bodies would be merging. There would be flows of energy moving. The chakras would be doing beautiful designs. You would be seeing the most, if it was a good session, if they had a good connection, right? You would be seeing the most beautiful energy interactions. Right now on this planet, we are so blinded by the illusion. We look in the mirror and we think that's what we look like, where we look at somebody else and we think that's what they look like, because we're seeing just the 2D, the D2 level of the light form. And that is what is called the physical matter, right? That's actually your D2 level. You're perceiving it from D3, one dimension above, and it appears to be solid, right? If you took away the masks on what making love is, or what even masturbation is, you would see the most amazing dynamics of light, and you would hear the most amazing dynamics of sound, and you would realize that it is a sacred act. You are creating currents. You are manifesting. You are moving energies. And the energies you are moving are the energies of God's source, the parts of the energies of God's source that God's source entrusted to you and gave to you in creating you as a light body being. So once you can do that, first of all, if you have stigmas about sex, some people have been raised in a way where they just forget it. The whole thing, I'm sick of the whole thing. It's just miserable because they might have been in a lot of nasty relationships that were, if you looked at them, they'd look like horror shows in energy, right? If you have aversions to the thought of sexuality for male, female, or at all, just take the physical bodies away and try to imagine a beautiful act of lovemaking, how you might think in your heart lovemaking should feel. The heart's making love, right? Forget the body parts that make you nervous and just imagine the light balls moving and singing to each other. Just imagine what that would be like. You can really begin to help overcome any issues you have about body distortions relating to sex by realizing sex isn't about the bodies. It's actually something else. If you've had horrible experiences sexually, if you've been raped, if you've been abused, if things have happened to you where you just can't stand the whole thought and still use the S word because the whole word itself is enough to make you upset. If you have issues like that, you can begin to heal them by putting the bodies here for now and pulling the consciousness away. And if it was a negative event, realize what you witnessed was, imagine there was energy involved and there was a lot of icky blacks and browns and yucky, nasty-looking energy, right? Take it off the body. Free the body from that. All right, realize that is what's upsetting you. All right, that is where the pain is coming from. It's that nasty, yucky ball of energy you just saw. All right? So it doesn't have to have a face anymore. It doesn't have to have a body. And it doesn't have to be a block to certain parts of your own anatomy anymore. If you can first disassociate it from the physical body. And then once it's a nasty energy field, you can take that, hold that there and say, I got you now. You don't got me. I've got you. All right? And then over here next to it, create here in your heart a feeling of the most beautiful homecoming. I found the absolute love of my life. It might be a partner. It might be God. It doesn't matter. It's just the most beautiful love. Imagine the colors. Feel the pale pinks and beautiful pastels and the lovely, lovely colors that would come there, and feel and let that emotion run in your body. All right, try to imagine. And try to keep it away from bodies. Imagine it's all happening in energy, right? Beautiful colors of energy coming, and they're healing you. They're beautiful elemental energies that know and understand the pain you went through and know that you will heal now. You are safe now, right? Create an energy ball with those colors. Try to feel the reality and energy. And then remember the one you had over here, that you pulled it out of the body images so it couldn't hide anymore for what it was. Now take the nice one that you created, the healing one, and make it bigger. And you can even breathe fast a couple times, almost like as if you were making love. You don't have to do anything with your parts, but when you breathe fast, you're making your arcs go faster and your pillar of power move up and down. You're making more sparks. Build them into the heart chakra. Blow them into the image of the healing ball of energy that you're making. And then take that ball and move it over and put it right all over that painful ball of energy. All right? That was held in your elemental body, connected to your sex organs. Okay? First, you separate it from the sex organs by separating it from the body. Then, you create the experience in spirit and in emotion that you want to feel, that you know is the healing. And you can do that if you focus on it and realize you have the ability to create that. And then move that feeling over and let it dissolve. And you may have to do it several times, but you can dissolve progressively those feelings of the nasty, mucky energies that have created filters where you can't even tell what your sexual orientation might be. Because if you've had traumatic experiences where sex is concerned, you'll have so many nasty energy balls that feel so awful that just to function, you'll have made a division between your mind and that part of your emotional body because you don't know what to do with it because it's overwhelming. Because all of those nasty energy colors also create chemical realities in the body. They create bipolar power struggles in the body and real messes. So you can begin healing with a simple exercise like that. Now, if you have a situation where you actually like sex, and maybe too much, some people are like addicted to sex. That's a red flag there. Like, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing, okay? Sex is fine, but if we take the bodies off it again, okay, What are you doing? Imagine yourself, you're getting ready, you don't have a partner, but you're getting ready, you're going to go find one. You know, like maybe it's bar night, you know, whatever. You know, wherever you go to find somebody that might go home with you tonight. Be a guy or a girl, because both genders do it, right? What are you really looking for, actually, right? Some part of you is doing a little tingling, saying, yeah, I'd like to do that tonight. I'd like to, you know, yeah, I'd like to do that. What is the that, really? All right, you know what it looks like on the outside. You know what that whoosh feels like when it comes at, you know, if you have a good night and you actually manage to bring somebody home to share that with you or to help you get there. If not, you end up with yourself trying to make yourself whoosh. But you're looking for the whoosh. What is it you're really looking for? It's something. Now, if you take the body off of it again and bring your whole self as an energy field over and try to look at yourself as an energy ball, what is that energy ball going out to that bar for tonight? What if you took the bodies away? You know, want to find girls, want to find guys. No, forget. Take all the bodies away. All you have are energy balls in this bar as well, or wherever it is you're going. Right? What does this energy ball want to do with those energy balls? This will tell you. You'll start to understand, what are you really doing? Why are you getting an urge, and why are you following it? And maybe you should at least understand what it is you're following and why before you decide it's a good thing to do. Because a lot of people are run around by their private parts and the chemicals they generate without really thinking about whether that might be a good thing right now or that might be a good person to share that with. And that gets them in a lot of trouble as well. It creates very convoluted relationships and very mucky-looking energy balls and all sorts of things. But if you can start to look at sexuality and sexual organs as simply masks that are being worn by energy balls that are identities, all right, you will find sometimes people that have very, very active sex drives, there is something that's almost agitated like this in the energy ball when you pull it away from the mask of the body, right? It has an overload. It has too much of something, which means it has not enough of something else. And it's trying to stabilize and balance itself by finding the other thing that is lacking, which would balance out the too much of. If it has too much mana energy, it will actually seek ire energy to bring itself into balance, so it stops going like this, right? Because it creates chemicals that go like this in the body, where you feel like, I think they call that horny, all right? All right? Or that progressively builds, right? Now, there's a certain degree of that. That's absolutely natural. But some people, really, it gets bad because they're building too much of either. It can happen with the ire, too. You can have too much ire where you used to get the same sense, except that's more like a, gotta have somebody, right? That tends to go up here and do the heart chakra thing where you're like, you know, trying to find your husband on the third date. You know, that kind of thing, right? Yeah. If we could start to realize we're energy balls that are trying to interact with other energy balls to get something or give something. And most of the time, it's because we're trying to get something that we don't realize we actually need, because we're just following chemical cues that are given to us by our bodies, by the elemental kingdom in our bodies. When we start to understand what we're actually doing, what is a sex drive, what is being horny, what is having an orgasm, you can learn to interact with it more intelligently. You can learn to have good orgasms. You can learn to say, I don't really have to right now. You can learn to say, do I really want to spend another $1,000 this week going to various bars or maybe Club Med, trying to find somebody to do it with? What am I trying to do is the question in those type things. What is it I'm trying to do? I want to find a date. Why? I want to find a partner. Why? So I can have sex. Why? Most people don't ask that part. They can get through the other bit. Well, why do I want to have sex? Well, because I want to. Why? Well, because I have an urge. Right? Well, what kind of urge? A sexual urge. Well, what does that mean? Oh, right? But it's there, right? You know, it's passion. You know, love. I want love, man. Everybody hides under the word love. I'm looking for love. No, you're not. You're looking for energy, sweetie. Right? There's a difference, right? Now, that doesn't mean love can't be attached to sharing energy. But most people are into sexuality. They're either running away from it or running toward it because they're trying to get something or stop somebody else from getting something because it's out of balance the way it's being used. Eventually, we can learn by first having good relationship with our energy ball called ourself after we move the mask called the body off of it temporarily to actually see what we're being directed to do chemically by our elementals. We can start to have a decent relationship with that part of ourselves. We can start to laugh at our urges and say, if I'm feeling that, I'm alone in the world. Girls get this a lot. I think some guys probably do too, but most of the people I've met are heavy ire people. They carry a lot of ire energy, the magnetic energy. I just feel so alone in the world. I feel incomplete. I couldn't function here. I just really need a partner. I just want a good man, you know what I mean? Just to stand by me, you know, and to feel safe and be my provider and you know, and I'll cook and clean and be really supportive and be second mate and you know, and that's fine with me. What are you really looking for? You're looking for a vertical connection through which you find safety, security, the ability to stand on your own 2 feet, the ability to protect yourself. People that go into that space are looking for those qualities, but they're transposing them into an image of an identity called a man, or sometimes it's, you know, a woman, right? Same thing is happening with others who go after, oh, isn't she hot? Oh, I like that one. Boy, look at those, right? She's really stuck. I'm a boob guy. You know, I'm a buff guy. You know, what is this bit with body parts with guys? You know, I mean... But you know, girls can be just as bad. I have heard girls in locker rooms going, oh, he's really hung. Yeah, oh, I like that one. And nice ass on that one. You know, girls like to complain about guys talking about body parts, but girls can be just as bad. They can be worse. You know? So what is this fixation from either side on body parts? What are they really looking for? These are questions we need to start looking at because we're just on autopilot, either running away from them or running toward them, letting them direct our lives, which means direct our energy, right? When a person's looking at body parts, what do you think breasts symbolize? What might a guy who considers himself a breast guy actually be looking for? Well, if you understand that sort of, but this goes back to breastfeeding. What do babies actually suckle from their mother's breast? Milk? That's just the carrier. It connects to the 4th astral field, the 4th chakra, the astral field. It's a way to suck energy off the astral field. And mothers share their astral field energy to support their babies and to assist them in developing. And that's why there's certain things that actually is carried in breast milk that you can't get out of formula that actually assist in the immune system for the child in those kind of things if the mother is healthy. Now, if you understand that about mother and baby relationships and you find yourself being a breast guy, what might that say that you need to yourself? It's not about being embarrassed. It's about saying, so that's why I like titties. You know, right? They give me that astral connection. I really like that. Yeah. If you can have enough humility to realize that behind these little preferences and these little escapisms that we label things with, there is a reason and energy, a thing you're trying to do or look for. There's something you're being motivated to do. There's other things that have to do with the other end of parts that people might be attracted to. There are certain characteristics that every part of the body is connected to a certain part of energy of the chakras. There's certain chakras govern certain areas of the body and functions of the body. You know, base chakra and second chakra tend to be the ones dealing with sexual organs. The 4th and 5th chakra tend to deal, and the 8th tend to deal with matters of the heart that are, you know, heart, lungs, and those kind of things. So there are all these things that if we can learn to understand the symbolic language that our elemental self uses, right? It'll send you chemical urges and ideas and preferences and things you kind of find attractive or not attractive because they mean something else. And you'll say, well, gee, I kind of like that shape of a person. You know, I'm attracted to that shape of a person. But there's a part of you on the elemental level that's actually saying, that's the energy I'm looking for. Because that particular shape of a person is actually carrying energy in a specific form. And that is the form that your elemental your elemental level is trying to connect to. If your elemental connection, which means your emotional body and your physical body, were all in its natural state, we wouldn't have problems. We wouldn't have to think about this because you wouldn't have part of the drive trying to take you down a black hole, literally, and the other part trying to help you heal and to heal the other part of itself. But right now, because the planet has 2 conflicting elemental fields, one, the one that is trapped within what is called the Metatronic net that is going into black hole fall, and the other that is very quickly self-regenerating and healing so it doesn't get trapped into that. There are 2 competing forces on the planet in the form of molecules and atoms, and they are what make up our bodies as well. So we're going to find conflicting urges. We're going to find you can get pulled around chemically. And when you're in the middle of it, all you know is you feel it. I mean, if you get up in the morning, it can happen in other ways that aren't even to do with sex, where it's the same stuff that's happening, but it's not connected to what you would consider sexual, but it's the same exact energy problems happening, where you get up and you really know that, okay, today I want to do this or that, and yeah, let's say I want to exercise today. I'm going to exercise. I know it's good for my body, and I feel good. You get, yeah, right. I don't have an ounce of energy to even lift my coffee cup. Forget exercise. You will have this like dampening force that actually you feel this force that just sits on your energy. This is the part of the elemental kingdom that's running through your body chemically that is trying to suppress the part that's actually trying to do good for you. Right? So you have this conflict inside. It can come out in conflicting thoughts. Oh, I want to go with this person. No, I don't want to go with this person. Yes, I do. No, I don't. Yes, I do. No, I don't. You can get stuck in confusion mode mentally because you're actually getting different signals sent by the attraction mechanisms in the body. You'll get the fight or flight going, and first you're flying, and then you're fighting, you're flying, or you're running away from, and then you're running to. All these patterns are coming from elemental confusion, and that's coming from the chakra 2 area and the chakra 1 area that have to do with the atomic and the subatomic fields. And hopefully, by the end of the workshops, the 2 days of workshop, we will have a better understanding, at least, of what are the parts that are connected to these forces. What are these chemical things that they're generating, and how can we begin to strengthen the part of them that rides the crystal spiral, which is the eternal life spiral, that is the natural elemental forces, the natural constructs, say hydrogen atoms that actually do have their neutron with their proton, because the ones here don't. And that's unnatural. It means they're not able to turn into light and do ascension. So there are things that we're going to learn. These will be the basics. The other 2 workshops that are part of this series, we'll get into more. The gender benders one, we'll get into more about what has been bent and how we can unbend it and get it back to natural function. We'll also be getting into a little bit on the genders. What we think there are 2 sexes here. Actually, there are 3 sexes, and they are you could say male, female, and androgynous. But more accurately, there are 3 sexes: Ire, Mane, and Manu. All right. They are the 3 sexes. They are the 3 primal force fields, source of source. And when we see male, when we think of the word male, what we are talking about is Mane. And when we see or talk about female, we are talking about Ire. And when we see an androge, which would be, if you wanted to use male and female, that would be androge as the 3rd gender. It could be a hermaphrodite, where it might have boy and girl parts, or it could be a eunuch, where it had neither. All right? It has a different orientation to sexual energy runnings, and therefore different feelings, different types of attraction versus non-attraction. But these are the 3 genders, and technically you can call them androgynous and male and female, but more accurately they are Mane, Ire, and Manu. And they're each just as holy as the other, and they each have specific purposes in relation to running energy in just on personal levels or even in collectives. Say if you have a whole bunch of Mane people on a planet and a whole bunch of Ire people on a planet and a whole bunch of Manu people on a planet. They all do something together that affects the entire planet in either a positive or negative way. So we'll learn a bit about the 3 genders. And there are also natural orientations, 4 basic natural orientations. You have heterosexual, you have homosexual, you have bisexual, and you have asexual. Yeah, I keep trying not to fit into the last category. It's like I think I did them all in my other lifetimes. This time it's like, hello down there. Come on, elementals, wake up. Because asexual, they actually really, really are, and it's normal, and it doesn't deserve labels, and it's not because they have an issue or a hang-up. There are people who really have no sex drive in terms of what other people call a sex drive. They have it, but it's a drive. It's a passion, but it doesn't circulate in the same intensity in the lower chakras. It tends to be more associated with higher chakras and being able to go up and out higher. And that doesn't mean it's higher better, that kind of stuff like, oh, you're just in your base chakra. A lot of that snooty spiritual stuff, that's nonsense. Because if you can't get into your base chakra, you're not going up very far because you need to take your base chakra with you, right? So there are different leanings with each of these types of the 3 genders, and each of the 3 genders can have any one of those orientations, or be a little bit of this one, a little bit of that one. So when people start pointing fingers at people that are homosexual and calling them bad names and telling them they don't have a right to be Christian and all this, boy, that makes me angry. Because you know what? No, I won't say that. I'll probably get shot. I'm just saying, once upon a time, there was a man I once knew who used to be my brother, half-brother, and he liked boys and girls. I just put it that way, and I'm not going to go any further than that. But anybody who knew Miriam might know who I'm talking about. And it was natural. If we could get rid of some of the garbage filters we have been fed to manipulate and control people and turn people against people and make them hate each other. All right? If somebody is gay, that does not mean they are deviant. It means they're obviously not in a heterosexual form. All right? Now, they can be any of the three genders, but they have a dominant leaning or a dominant set of filters that are the structure of their light body that create a natural attraction of polarities in energy that comes out toward same sex. But you will just, you'll find, even in same-sex couples, there is still one that runs more mane and one that runs more ire. So you still have guy and girl. Sometimes they'll flip back and forth, which is actually heterosexual, homosexual couples actually have a little bit easier way of doing this, where sometimes, like, you're the guy and I'm the girl, and sometimes I'm the guy and you're the girl, sometimes you're running more mane, sometimes I'm running more mane. They actually have a bit more flexibility as far as switching it. People who are very, very heterosexual, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, too. It's not as if each one is a different stage of evolution and you outgrow one to grow up into the other. Some people look at it that way, and it isn't that way. They each are holy, they each are sacred, they each are natural. And they each have the ability to create certain types of energy and co-creations, make certain types of links through the light body. And they are all sacred. They all have different purposes. There are some that are certain combinations that can create huge healing fields that can affect, like, say, plant kingdoms. There are certain combinations that can affect manifestations, huge manifestations. Say if you wanted to manifest a set of events, and there are ways you can combine energy. It's all about combining different types of energy with various compatible polarities. That's what sexual attraction is, and it's governed by the chemicals that are generated by the elemental forces that are generated by the structure of your light body and its function or dysfunction. So if anybody's going to get upset with me here, I would honestly say, if you really, really have to hate homosexuals, if you really, really, really have to insist that everybody should get horny and there's something wrong with a guy or a girl that doesn't, if you really, really have those beliefs and you feel really strongly about it, and I'm really ticking you off by saying it's different, we'll refund your money and you can leave, because you won't like anything that I have to say if you really are attached to those ideas. All right? Honestly, when I look at things of what's been done on this planet, it's really heartbreaking, because there are people who have been taught to hate other people because of the color of their skin. There are people who are white and hate blacks. There are people who are black and hate whites. There are people who are Israeli and hate Palestinians, and Palestinians who are Israelis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? Bigotry. Bigotry it's a twisted thought form that has created such misery where people could actually love and understand each other and help each other through the problems of this planet. It's instead turned them against each other in order for one to feel better than the other, because they didn't feel very hot about themselves in the first place. There is one more area that bigotry is applied, and it's reinforced by religions on this planet that are distortions of the natural Christian teachings, and not just Christian, because the original, what we call the Christ teachings, belonged to they were Buddhic teachings, they were Christian teachings, they were the Islamic teachings, all of those things, all put together, all right? These were the original teachings of the Christ, the Allah, the Buddha. These all have to do with the starborn cycle and the signature, the name signature, the original holy names that had to do with the vibrational frequencies of the original parts that created creation. All right. So bigotry is something that is hate-based. And if you point, it doesn't matter where you point it. If it's because somebody has a certain skin color, if it's because somebody has a certain partner of a certain gender and you don't think that's all right, who the hell are you? Is my answer to that. Who do you think you are to pass that kind of judgment on another person? Who are you as a white person to hate a black person, just to hate people because they're black? Who are you as a black person to blame white people for all the stuff that black people went through? Excuse me, I wasn't back there at that time, okay? If I had an incarnation that was part of the slave trade, I apologize now. But you know what? I wouldn't make that choice, all right? That might have been an aspect from before. But I'm not going to hate you, and I hope you won't hate me. Bigotry is enemy number one. You can be a bigot in many, many ways, where you start passing judgment on somebody else's way, where they're not doing anything to you directly, but you're passing judgment on them, and you're looking down your nose at them, and you're even cursing them under your breath. Or you're going out and standing on podiums and preaching that God said this is evil. Who the hell are you? And that's what I say to any of the priests and ministers and popes on this planet, because it is a blasphemy of the highest level for anybody to take sacred sex and to turn it into perversion that is used as a way to divide and conquer individuals that are aspects, that are faces, sparks of the consciousness of God's source. And that is what's been done on this planet. So excuse me if I get a little bit passionate about that one, because there is so much harm being created by that. There are so many people that try so hard, say, to be heterosexual because they can't bear the thought of what hell their life is going to turn into if they actually find out they're homosexual. Or maybe they realize that, you know, even if I was married to a girl, I still wouldn't want to have sex. Maybe they're asexual and they're tried real hard not to be frigid, and they find themselves doing stuff called having sex just because it's the only way to have a relationship with somebody who'll stay. There are people who go through this one where they'd really prefer to never ever have to use those parts directly on the outside. And that is okay, too. Now you try to combine an asexual with a person that has a high sex drive, man, a heterosexual or something, you're going to have some relationship problems. And it's not that the one is frigid and the other is oversexed. If they can both recognize they have a different set of natural light body structure, that if it was before you got married and you happen to have that problem, it might be good to really talk to each other honestly. Can we build a relationship that we could each be happy with? Because I can't turn myself into a sex demon for you, and I don't expect you to become a priest, you know, it's totally celibate for me either. You have to be fair and honor each other's. So there's a lot of things that when we begin to look at, what is this sexuality thing? What is its connection to spirituality? There are a lot of issues that hit home very, very deeply. They affect all of our relationships, what we choose to do, whether we choose to marry, who we choose to marry. And once we do choose to marry, what happens? Like, great, first year was great. Then what happened? I don't know. It all shut off. And we walk around and say, hello, good morning. Hello, good morning. Going to work. Bye. Right? And there's just like, whatever we had once just dissolved. Where did that go? This has to do with keys, which have to do with tachyons and tachyon cycles, and who has what keys. And once you play those keys and they sing their little harmonies, if you don't have any more keys that are compatible, you'll find you have keys that are compatible with somebody else's, and so will they, and you'll start to feel attractions going in other directions. Relationships aren't always meant to be from the time you're 15 and too dumb to know you shouldn't probably get married right now to when you are 900 and you finally decide, you know, I'm going to drop the body just to get out of this marriage because somebody once told me that it was a sin and horrible to not stay married, that marriage had to be forever. If you're an eternal being, forever is, you could almost deal with that if you know you have about a 75, maybe 85, 90-year lifespan. Eternal can be frightening. What if, say, once upon a time you got incarnated and you were 16 years old and you had this pheromone rush and so did this lovely other person, and you got together and you even had 20 years of halfway decent connection. And all of a sudden it's just like whatever it was, it's different. It's nice. It kind of hums. It's kind of like glowing embers, but forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Care about each other enough to say, look, I love you and I won't abandon you, but what do we need to do? Bring life back in by not trying to let the mold be the relationship. Don't try to force the relationship to fit a preconceived mold. Relationships are made of living light bodies and living beings. If a relationship begins to take the life out of either one or both, there's something wrong with the mold. And that means there's some level of the selves that are not being honest with themselves as far as what they actually feel. If a person has some sexual issues where, say, they really thought that they really might have been like homosexual, but just couldn't bear the thought, like their family would have crucified them, that kind of stuff, forget it. So they got married, had the kids, the whole bit, and they still find themselves really, really unhappy and feeling bad, guilty toward the person they married maybe, because they really just don't have that sexual attraction. The other person's still attracted to them, and they're still going, oh, I'm going through the motions. Wait, all right, excuse me, I'm getting interrupted. Wait a minute. What? And by the way, anybody who's new, I'm not nuts. I do this a lot. It's when I get the ones who write the books, right? The beloved, the ones who give us all these lovely diagrams, they do talk live. We don't channel because we don't endorse doing that, but we do listen. And sometimes I'll get interrupted in the middle. Okay. Yeah, I do lose track of time. I did say I was only going to go for an hour, didn't I? All right. I'm basically being told to save it also that there's an activation coming through, and I would feel better probably upstairs when it hits. Here it comes. Oh, boy. Oh, wow. Okay. Anyway, if any of you that have been working with us, and particularly any of you who have done the Lights of Aurora activations or anything, if you've been getting any spiky, like almost feel like chemical burn on your skin, heats coming up here and there, that's normal. It's part of the purging. We're part of the earth elemental twisted mutations are starting to purge out, but we're getting cycles of those. And it's to bring the natural earth elemental kingdoms back online as we're working with the frequencies of connecting with the crystal spiral. So if there is one coming through. I'm going to see if it's a group one or if it's just another part of the one that's been my cycle. I've been up and down all day having to lay down because it's been making me nauseous and that kind of stuff. And I thought, oh, this one's for all of us. All right. Okay, there's going to be one running in the shield, in the group shield. And for anybody that's new, just so you know, you're never obligated to participate in any of the techniques that we do. We're not doing a technique right now. We're going to be doing techniques Sunday. You will not get any energies that you don't want. If you're working with any of our technologies from, say you had bought some of the stuff you're working at home and you'd start the DNA activations, you will probably just come right online with the Indigo Shield and you will get them too. But if you haven't been, you can ask, you can just kind of put out to your own higher self and say, well, I'd like, you say your Christos self, aim for your Christos self. So I would like to, participate in this activation. Or you can say, I don't feel I'm quite ready to do this. I'm not too sure about this stuff yet, and that's fine. So if you want to receive the energies, when I make an announcement that they said there's an activation coming, it's running through the group shield, any of you always have the option, even if you've been with us for a long time and just decide you don't want to do that one or don't ever want to do one again, that's okay. Your free will always be respected, and you will not receive any energies that you say you do not want. But be clear, and that's why I tell you ahead of time, especially if you're new, that if something is running in the group shield, because a lot of these people have been to workshop after workshop together, and it's just immediate. One starts to fire their fire letters in the DNA, and it kind of starts to spread, and it goes really fast. You won't get that unless you ask for it if you haven't been participating with us. But you can ask and say, I'd like to try that. You can even say, I'll try it with a return policy. If I don't like doing this, right? We do not cord. You do not get chakra corded. You do not get implanted. You do not get plugged into somebody who's going to take over your body and you'll never see it again. So I just want you to know, if you're new, you're safe in doing that, but there's no obligation to participate in running of the energies. And I just want to say that. Anyway, I'm being told it's a good time to wrap up the orientation and to get back up where I can get the next piece in. The graphs, because right now I'm back to my pornographic cartooning. Because seriously, they're trying to show me where certain energy centers are in relation to this. And this is exciting stuff, because I don't know these things consciously either. And I can't wait to find out, because maybe it will do something to facilitate my asexual nature and becoming at least, I don't know, at least a step down would be nice, a step more focused into body. But for you guys, it will make it much more interesting, and at least we'll be able to give you one thing that will be valuable. When you go home, you will understand more about what you're carrying around in your body, with your body, than you might have before you came here. And once you understand that, you can start to kind of play with it just energetically. I'm not saying go play with yourself. I'm saying you can do that too if you want to, no problem, but you don't have to. But you can start thinking about it, there's certain ways you can breathe, that you can actually build energy down there, and then just move it up. to do other things with it. You can use it for healing. You can use it for clearing. There's something where they had me do this today because I started getting really, really bad cramps on one of the activations that came through. It was a big data download. I'm going, oh, God, intestinal cramps. And they said, here, do this. And they had me bend over and run my Ruchete spiral in a circle, which was a new one. And I'd never done that. And I realized, this is part of a technique, isn't it, for Sunday. And they said, yeah, it's not the whole thing, but it's part of it, but it'll help. And they had me breathe in a certain way with my palms on the floor and sitting in a chair with my palms on the floor. And it was amazing. After a certain number of breaths of a certain pace, it all just went, and it just stepped back up, and it was fine. It was gone. It just shifted whatever was causing the cramping, in my body and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of things you can do with the sexual energies, and they can be converted into other things. There will be a time when we teach things about what couples can do once both sides of the couple know some things about how to run their sexual energy. Because you'll scare the heck out of somebody if you know how to run your sexual energy, let's say, right? And you decide you're going to, couple with them, and they're like just off the street and don't even know what a chakra is, right? And you start saying, well, I'm going to touch you here, and I'm going to do this. They're either going to think you're like a master of the universe and just like melt and be your puppy forever, which is not a relationship you want to establish. You'll regret it, believe me, you would. Or they would think you're like, some kind of like sex magician type, occult person, and might be very scared of you. So it is good to, once you understand a bit about these parts, there are gentle ways that you can inform someone, loving ways. If you have a partner that doesn't want to hear about this stuff from workshops, that's fine. You can gently share little ideas with them so you don't terrify them. But you can learn to harmonize communications with each other. There are things you can do with just your palms, say, before you go in for an evening date night. If you're married or whatever, you can do certain things with your palms that then runs through the chakras that creates a much more harmonious experience between the chemicals in the body as well as the energy fields in the body, so you have a much nicer connection together during the act of coupling. So there are ways that we'll start here with understanding our relationship with sexuality, our spirit, and ourselves and source. And then we will grow that into being able to share that with another person. And I don't think they'll ever take it into groups, because as far as I've heard, orgies are only for people who really need to suck energy off other people, because that's really what it is. People that want to do that stuff, we don't judge it. We're not bigoted about it. But there were times in the ancient times where it was abused terribly, where it was used to generate sex magic energy to blow open portals that didn't belong there, to do some really nasty stuff. You don't need to do that unless you're desperate for your own energy. Any one person or two persons that come together in the name of the Christ, where two or more are gathered in my name, in the name of the Christ, it gives enough energy where you don't need the amplification factor of having a million bodies rolling around breathing and huffing and puffing. I mean, if you're going to do that, just simply do a stand or a sit-in and have everybody just breathe their arcs. You know what I mean? You don't need to go fiddling with each other. You can generate just as much energy. I'm not judging anybody that's into the multiple partner scene, but it is exploited. There are certain, say, gurus and things like that who have these sex energy parties and the whole bit, and you should be honored because I'm sleeping with you, and they're usually guy gurus. They have this harem, of women that, oh yes, I get to be touched by the guru. Oh God, aim vertically with that kind of stuff. There's a lot of abuse that goes down with sexual energy, and it couldn't happen if it weren't for the fact that most people don't understand what it is anymore, because the teachings of what that was, which were common knowledge in the Atlantean period, have been taken away from us, and they have been twisted. What is left are teachings by a bunch of people who created control dogmas to try to harness people's energy and use it for various things. Breeding is one of them. But the thing is, the knowledge is still, the sacred sex knowledge is still alive within you. It's just turned off. It's in the parts of the DNA that science calls the junk DNA. The natural chemical relationships of eternal life are still in there. And when we work with these energies and the techniques that this work is a part of, what we are doing is bringing that natural potential of eternal life, of the Christ, and of a natural sex drive back into manifest form. And I look forward to tomorrow to see how far we've gotten. I think tomorrow will be more, graph day, where, oh, by the way, it's funny, had a bunch of graphs ready. I had 55 of them for some reason. It came out 55, and I was thinking, gotta get 4 more, right? Don't like the 55 number. It's one of those Metatronic numbers. But it's kind of funny because I've never had a suitcase get eaten alive by the airline, right? Yeah, we're still waiting for it. In fact, Az left because he had to go over again to see. They said, like, after 48 hours it should appear. Well, it still hasn't. They told him to come back to see if it came in on the next flight from London. So all of my clothes and the Mylars that I had prepared before are all in that suitcase that was eaten. We had 5 suitcases that we brought over with us because we're moving stuff into the house that we got in Colorado. And the only one that didn't come was the one that had my workshop clothes and the Mylars. So the only reason I had to put Mylars under, which I never used to, is because now they weigh the hand luggage. And 50 Mylars weigh a lot. Transparencies, they're heavy. So I'm always over on my hand luggage, so I had to stick it in. So it's kind of funny. Right now we're hoping that when Az comes back, we'll have those, and they at least have nice, clean drawings. I don't have the words on them yet. I was going to do that when we got here 2 days ago. They didn't show up. Yeah. So, I just wanted to explain, too, hence my trousers that I'm hiding. Because the suitcase didn't show up, I thought I'd just share that with you. I'm wearing pajamas because they were very, very lucky that because the airline knew it messed up, it gave us a little voucher for, I think it was like $75 to go replace whatever because we know you don't have any clothes, right? To wear. Right? So we have, what are those, have everything you could ever want marts, not far from here, and $3 on the clearance rack. I got myself an outfit. Actually, I got myself 3, and you'll see each of them. But they're a bit lively. So I'm a bit color-oriented, but this was even a bit intense for me. So if you're wondering why, and especially any new people, oh my God, look at it in these sunglasses, right? Yeah, it was. I wasn't going to dress quite this flashy or vibrant, but it had to do with the $3 clearance rack. Actually, at everything you could want mart right down the street. So I'm glad you're all here, and I hope we have a very interesting and hopefully healing workshop. I'm hoping that some of the things that we will be able to get down, through in these 2 workshops, will assist us each in private ways to heal a piece of something, because everybody's got a piece of sexual confusion with them. I would be amazed if you didn't, because it is a very complex issue. Because sexuality is connected to everything. It's about your energy polarity balances, which are about how your light body is functioning, which has to do with not only you here, but also all of your other simultaneous incarnations in other space-time zones. Which means, yes, if you have a self back in ancient Egypt that's having a very big orgy in the sarcophagus and generating lots of light blue light balls, you can actually inherit some of those light balls right through your DNA, because time is simultaneous, which means it is happening right now. All the other times, it is a field of energy. And times are cycles of energy pulsations that all are happening at the same time in the same space. But they are at different speeds of pulsation and a different angular rotation of particle spin. So yourselves in other times are your incarnations, the rest of who you are right now. And they are all affecting you, but you are also affecting them. What you can do by getting elemental command back, the power of elemental command back in your present lifetime, the more you heal those powers within yourself, you actually will reach back right through your own DNA, backward and forward in time, to the other aspects of your own identity that are simultaneously incarnate. which also means you will clear your karmic imprint. Because what karma is the influence of those other simultaneous space-time vectors, where your identity, because it was too big to come into one space-time vector, had to break itself down into specific patterns. And the smallest pattern you come in with is 1728. All right? That's 144 times 12. All right? So this is your family of consciousness. You will be helping your family of consciousness. You will also be clearing the influence of some, say, wanton members of your family of consciousness that might have got themselves into things that they probably shouldn't have in other space-times, locations that are affecting you. You can begin to break that chemical link, because it is a chemical link in your DNA that actually what you did in ancient Egypt could be directly affecting what is happening in your body right now, as far as what your DNA capacity is, what you're being attracted to, what your sexual drive is. So it's a healing opportunity as we begin to understand what the sexuality actually is, what its connection to spirituality is, and how it is a very, very sacred energy. And that doesn't just mean it was meant to make babies. It can do that too. But it's also meant to be shared, first of all and foremost, with God's source, as a living, breathing circulation of energy. The greatest ecstasy you can ever experience, and no matter how good you get at sacred sex here, there's one thing you'll never, ever be able to quite experience with a physical body. And that's the level of ecstasy that is experienced when you go fully home into God's source as consciousness. It is the biggest orgasm you've ever seen. It's not just an little light gasm. It's a big gasm, right? It's the ecstasy, the ecstatic space. And you don't need to do sexual things in order to reach that state either. But if you start to reach spiritual ecstasy, don't be surprised if your private parts join you, and don't be embarrassed, because you may find they definitely respond. So anyway, I'm going to stop now, and I hope you have a very good evening and good morning, afternoon tomorrow. We will come together for 3 o'clock here, and I hope you understand why. I mean, if you've been with us for a while, you know why. You know that all day is spent getting ready, because we're getting the live transmission down for what we're going to teach that evening. But if you're new, please just understand that we have to do it this way. Or you just end up pacing outside the door wondering why I'm not there at 10 o'clock, and wondering at 1 o'clock why I'm not there at 10 o'clock, and wondering at 4 o'clock why I'm not there at 10 o'clock. So it's easier this way. We'll do 3 o'clock tomorrow, 3 till 7, and then 7 till 9 will be dinner, then 9 to 11-ish will be the other part of tomorrow night's workshop. We'll probably do the same Sunday, but we'll try to wrap it up early enough where it's not an issue of people who have to leave on planes, for Monday morning. So thank you for joining us here in Denver, and see you tomorrow. Coming in fast and now. So what we do have our 55 graphs back with no words on them, which is really fun, especially when it's new material where I have to remember everything that the words are supposed to be on them. We've got some of them set enough to show you where they're going. What's most important with the information tonight is to make the link between what we have known about Source, about our connection to Source through the light body, and particularly about where this all started with Partakai 1, what this has to do with tachyon cycles, because when it comes right down to the end of that journey, which is the journey of creation, when we get down to the end of that, it comes right down to your chakras and to your base chakra. And that's what we're going to be dealing with tomorrow. And we're going to be learning a technique that I don't know yet. They haven't told me, but they told me what it does. It begins to turn on what's called the crystal spiral in the entire chakra system. It's an accelerated activation. It's occurring because even though the grid work at Shasta was successful, there has been something that has occurred not to the indigo shield in the meantime that has to do with the rainbow bridge. And those of you who have been with the work know what that means. That's that middle path for those who couldn't make the leap to crystal spiral yet. And so they didn't get caught in the threshold Metatronic spiral and the full Wisadrak black hole fall that this planet is destined toward. Now, the rainbow bridge is not holding already. It's not because of anything that we're doing, or the indigos are doing or not doing. It's because something that occurred between the Tothian Anunnaki groups and a particular group that are working with the Thetans that had a particular vengeance with them. And the Tothian shield is falling. There were a large percentage of those who are going to go into the Rainbow Bridge. So what we have are mainly the Jehovian Anunnaki groups and some of the Enochian Anunnaki groups left, as far as those being able to if they're assisted out, possibly be able to make a link to the crystal spiral. So once again, we're going through a grid acceleration on this planet in order to assist those groups who can still hold and try to hold at least partial crystal. And that involves directly interfacing with the chakras. Now, even though that's Gridmaster stuff, and if you're not here for Gridmasters, that's okay, because the first part of the mastery of the grids is the mastery of your own body, and that's what the information that we're going to be covering in this workshop is about. We finally got around to being at this workshop, because they were showing me how... I kept saying, can't we just talk about the lower part of it? And they said, no, when you start out, that's why they wanted it in 3 different workshop blocks, where the first one we dealt with the creation science, your relationship to source through your light body, how that applies to your chakras, and how those chakras and your Rishite spiral apply to the act of sexuality or the acts involved with sexuality. We are here. Tomorrow we're going to make the link between the chakras and the sexual aspect that will work our way down towards, so you see where all the other stuff fits in to those parts of your anatomy. Then we'll take it from there into understanding what those parts also have to do with what's called elemental command, and these elemental fields of consciousness that your body is literally composed of. And there's a whole lot of information coming through now. I think they're going to name the first 5 out of 12 elemental commands. I know at some point, and I don't know if it's going to be this workshop, but the information on elemental commands that starts with the graphs you'll soon see that have to do with the pulsing of the Taran and tachyon cycles, this information eventually culminates into what is the atomic table of elements, the real one, where we actually learn what there are actually 144 natural occurring, what would be called elements that form the base atomic structure of this planet. So all of this, once it gets down to the point where it's anchored in 3D terms, why it's important to learn about tachyons, why it's important to understand where these spark pulse currents come from. It has to do with something called their encryption, which is the vibrational signature that they carry in the form of Jalesic radiation points that when it comes down here, they are connected to what are called joules. Joules are what I believe they're in science here, they say there's about 4 point something or other joules equals 1 calorie, and 1,000 of those equals 1 kilocalorie. That's the thing you eat. All right, so our body is run on these things, is what it comes down to. We're going to learn what the actual atomic table of elements really is, because what we're looking at now is the distorted one. It comes down to atomic numbers. How many protons and neutrons are in the nucleus of an atom determines its atomic number, which determines its placement on the periodic table of elements. There is a mutation in the elemental field on this planet, on the Earth level of the elemental field on this planet. However, that mutation does not extend to the Eartha field, and the Eartha field is the larger field within which the Earth field is presently residing. We are going to be taught how to turn back on the crystal spiral in relation to the natural atomic structure, and what this is going to look like by the end is going to be basically, we don't have to be here anymore, which means we will be able to take bodies out. This is the beginning of training for what's actually called the 12 tribes, for those who want to become part of the smaller groups we're going to do, where we actually start teaching people first to, as they're working with healing the body and getting it to the point where it can hold the Eartha elemental content, where it can clear the distortions in the atomic structure here. We're going to be training people progressively for the point in time when the Eartha gates open sufficiently where some of us will be able to be taken through and trained from there. And that will be really exciting, because it literally will be like walking through a hole in the sky or in the side of a mountain that nobody else saw, and you walk through with your body and you end up someplace else that seems like heaven compared to here. And it won't be heaven yet, it's just Eartha, which is still way down here in density 1, right? But it's a far cry from where we've been for the last many, many, many millions of years on this planet. So all of this is all connected. Sexuality is directly connected to all of this, because it's one of the most confused and convoluted areas of life in human form on this planet. And it is because the mutation that is held in the sexual chakras that babies are born with the mutation right in their fields, right in their DNA. This is a mutation that we now need to work with technologies to more rapidly clear. Now, some of the clearing is fun. Anybody that's getting the lava skin, where you just get these heat flashes, and all of a sudden it feels like you have lava on your skin, and it's like, ow, ow, ow. Yeah, but they go away quick. But when they spike, they spike. That is part of the healing process. That is part of the purging process, where we are progressively going to be purging the Metatronic traces, Metatronic code from the earth elemental kingdoms out of our bodies as we open the fields of the earth elemental kingdom into our bodies, which means we're upgrading the content of our atomic structure to the point where it can hold full base 12 atomic structure. Part of the way we're going to do this, and this is part of what we're going to be learning a little bit about tonight and a bit more about tomorrow, has to do with the elementals, which goes right back to the pulsing of the Taran and tachyon cycles, and it has to do with something called encryption, because there's a specific set of encryptions or core signatures that each level of the light body and each level of the chakras are naturally composed of in a base 12 Christic system. We can begin the process of very rapid healing of the chakra systems, working from the outside in, as it were, because we've been working from up, from out, way up in heaven, down through, and, slowly getting out to the flesh that we know and walk around in. But we can begin the healing process working both ways now, where we can use encryption itself directly and work with the chakras to re-encrypt their natural jewel signatures into the chakras. It will begin rapid opening of the four-way horizontals, and the chakras have 6 vortices to them. They're not supposed to just have 2, one coming out the front, one coming out the back. There's another set coming out the side, and there's one large one going up and one large one going down. Right now, they're all messed up because of the Metatronic mess. We are going to learn how to re-encrypt the original encryption. The original encryption comes from the first Partakai that was ever born, and that's what this stuff is. And I'm not going to read all this to you, believe me, because we'll be here for 600 years. But I wanted to show you a progression. It's a progression of something that we are in the process of putting together. You'll see stuff that is in this condition, right? This is not even typeset yet, all right? The first stage is scratching it down somewhere. The second stage is getting it typeset. And the third stage is pulling that typeset apart and illustrating it, sometimes line by line by line, because sometimes the processes that are being explained are so detailed and so complex that you literally have to take 2 lines and make 3 pictures to explain and show what that means. Or else it's just a bunch of gobbledygook like this to anybody that's trying to understand what these processes are. These particular sequences that you'll see, you're not going to even see these fast. They're going to just flip by really quick. There's one diagram I want to kind of point to that eventually is going to be an actual diagram, and it'll have all sorts of neat things that make sense. It goes with this series. This series is the pre-birth series. This is the beginning place where thought in the consciousness of God Source became and becomes repeatedly the first Partakai. And from that stage where creation, eternal life creation, was literally born, and from that point literally is reborn continually because it's perpetual motion. We've covered bits and pieces of various things, particularly since Tenerife. We've been caught in February. We've been hit with tons and tons of information, so much that it's very, very hard to even get it in this form before the next wave of it comes through. And what's kind of scary about that is it's information we need to know how to do the next level of techniques that are necessary to keep up with the changes in the planetary grid so we don't get run over by the environmental influences of the Metatronic spiral that's activating in the planetary grids. So we have sequences. Hopefully by next year sometime you will see this sequence as the pre-birth and birth of Partakai sequence. Then after that, there's another sequence that is the birth of the triad. Then there's another sequence that is the birth of the Taran. Now, we've begun to put together the sequence that has to do with the creation or the birth of the Taran. It started with the first thought in the mind of Source that became the first Partakai and then the second Partakai. And through Partakai 1 and 2, we went into the next phase where Partakai 2, as it's birthing, splits Partakai 1, becomes the Partakai and the Partakai, and that begins the process of Partakai phasing, which is the process by which the eternal living light seed is created. Now, it's through phasing of the triad, that is the stage after these scratchy diagrams, that we get into the birth of the Taran. We talked about the Taran a bit ever since Tenerife, when they kind of hit us with this stuff about the Taran, and going, oh my God, what is this? How does this work? What is it? Well, we've got to the point where we know what the Taran is. We even know how it was created. It is from that point that you can see what something called the Kristalla, or the Christ Allah pattern, is an encryption that is held by this core first light unit is the living light seed called the taran. Understanding the taran is important, not just because you have one in your body, but you also have several smaller ones that aren't called tarans. They're called, I don't know what the name of them is, probably the Moda Ettore complex that we talked about ages ago, that's all connected with this, the male within the female within the male. But we all have a taran living light unit. It is the first point where this body entered manifestation in preconception. Before you were actually conceived in the flesh, there was a point where you were conceived in the spirit. And from that point, the flesh was born. And that is part of the conception process here. But there's also this process that takes place with understanding the taran. It is not just people that have a taran. Everything in manifestation originally started with a taran light seed. Right now on the planet, when beings come in and incarnate here, they immediately have a reversed upside-down taran, because that is what the planetary taran is carrying because of the mutations in the planetary grids and the electromagnetic fields on the planet. So what we have already done, and the people who are just beginning to come into this work, you're fortunate in one way, because there's people that have, for the last 5 years, have been doing a lot of work to bring up the DNA activation levels and the shield activation levels in order to be able to proceed with these type of activations. If you're coming in now with a group of people like this, where you have the majority of them who have been working with these technologies for a while, particularly with those who have done the techniques from Tenerife and Phoenix, Easter, and Shasta, there is a really high activation level that will actually help you to gain and hold temporarily the activation levels that we are going into now. We are going into what is called the rebirth of the monad within the time period that we are here. It's sometime tomorrow. They didn't tell me what time yet, probably in the evening. But it is the next phase in what is called a tachyon cycle. It is a key generation cycle. We have been going through a series of these ever since I believe it was Tenerife was the first one. Now, it's been a bit vague trying to explain, okay, how many of these are there? When do we get done with this? What exactly is it? All right, we're making keys. Great, and keys become tachyons. Okay. Right. There's a lot of pieces in that sequence of knowledge that have been needed. And that is why, as far as when I finally kind of wrote out and said, help me sequence this. We have bodies of information on huge amounts of things. Everything from history to first creation mechanics to physics. You know, can you please show me the story? Like, where's page 1? And they said, we start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. So we started almost at the beginning. This is the beginning. We haven't got to those graphs yet, because I can at least explain to you there is a set of processes by which a partakai is born. And when that partakai is born, another one follows right after it, and that sets in motion the partakai phasing process by which eternal life, living light creation is made. From there, we can jump really fast to the taran, because by understanding the taran, you start to understand something called the Jaleesic states. These are states of pre-manifestation. They're before pre-matter. We're not even talking pre-matter. It's the Jaleesic states that are behind the pre-matter. These are the borderline between being still at one with the consciousness field that is the non-manifest body of Source and making that step into the manifestation arena. So if we begin to understand these Jaleesic states, if we begin to understand something called Urs and Rus, right? These are actually units of measure of stored electrical potential. And they are very specific. And believe me, this has been crazy, because I haven't had time to put them on graphs or anything yet. But I finally have got them. I've even got the how many units of stored electrical potential are in a Ru or in an When you combine that, subtract this from that, you get a joule. And a joule should be this, but with the mutation, it's actually this down here. And there's like a variance somewhere in there. The phi ratio fits in, and you know that, which is a mutation on what's supposed to be the Jaffa ratio. And it's I mean, all of this plugs in to what we're walking around in very, very technically in 3D terms. It plugs into the heavy science. But you don't need to know all the heavy science. What's most important to know is that if you can understand a bit more about what a tachyon cycle is, first of all, you'll understand what it means to be assembling keys, and understand how keys eventually become tachyons, and how tachyons eventually become spark pulse currents. Right? Spark pulse currents are currents of quark-like structures that flow at certain times outward from the core, from the first creation point, and all the way out to the outer domains of creation, where we are actually, our reality field is actually in. And we can begin the process of bringing those spark pulse currents from first creation back through the body, and this is what it means to make the crystal connection. It is beginning the full activation of the crystal spiral within the body. The crystal spiral is important because it is a spiral of energies that come out from the core, from the first creation point, where you left source as a Gestalt consciousness. You are actually a huge family of consciousness. And you have worked your way out and had to break yourself into more and more pieces, right, to get into the more outer levels of density in order to be able to experience a hologram with space, time, and matter that are characteristic of outer domains. So there is a point, though, that all of us have, way back through all those identities, where there is one little signature in the private encryption that was that of your family of consciousness. You'll have that encryption of your family of consciousness, but there's one little piece of that is just you. And by reawakening the encryption of our family of consciousness, by reawakening the natural core encryptions within the levels of the light body structure, we will be able to find the line that will allow that one little piece of us to connect with the rest of what it rode out on. And that will allow the backflow currents, the backflow return currents, they're called, to come back out into the body. So it is a rapid acceleration, opening to source process that we're involved in. It's important to understand tachyons, too, if you ever want to understand elementals, if you ever want to understand really what elemental command is about, which I am just learning about, too. I know I've known this in other lives, and I've actually been heads of elemental commands before, but I can't remember a darn thing at this point, not from here, and it's because the information has actually been blocked. It's not really been allowed on the planet for a long time, because once you learn to tell atoms what to do and they actually listen, if you don't have really good spiritual manners, you could really cause a lot of harm, as certain beings have proven on this planet. So we're going to learn about some of the... We're going to go really quick through these stages. I'm just going to whip these by just to show you that this is stuff that's coming in a set of graphs. That would be stage 1. Stage 2 would be a set of graphs that I'll really quickly breeze by. They have to do with the birth of the triad, and then really fast to the birth of the Tarn. And that's where you'll get in to see some of the new graphs we've been working on. And some of them are updates of old graphs, but you'll see the first 5 anyway have words where you'll see the detail that is going into these. What we're trying to do is prepare this information in writing, and it is the real creation story, all right? It is I won't even insult it by calling it the Bible, honestly, or any of the other holy books here, because this is the information, the true Christian teachings, the crystal teachings. These are the teachings Christianity was taken from. These are the teachings that Buddhism was taken from, the ones that Islam was taken from, all of those things. That's where we have Allah, we have Buddha, we have Christ, we got Kristalla, we got them all. All right? They're all part of this body of teachings. And one day before we leave this place, we will leave at least the sequence from once there was a Partakai in the mind of God. God thought about having a Partakai and then did this, right? And that's how this occurred, because the same process by which Source created creation is the same process that occurs every time we think a thought. But we don't know it, so we're creating unconsciously, and we're creating more and more messes. And now we have lots of elemental things stuck in our bodies because other people created messes on our planet, and our creation is out of control, and we feel out of control and imprisoned in our body. If we ever want to live in a reality field that is not like this, did you ever think about how what is running this planet? Do you ever think about how anti-Christian the morals are that are used by most world governments? And the more modern countries are supposedly the advanced ones. That's frightening, right? Because the corruption is so almost to the core here that people think it's normal. They don't even remember there's anything different. And the more awake and aware you get, the more horrendous you will look at this and go, I can't stand it here. There's one saving grace in this. It's not dive off off a spaceship now and just, annihilate yourself. That's not the answer. Because by being here, you can help to get the gates open so you don't have to be here anymore and you don't have to dump a body to do it. You can take one with you. There are places that don't operate like this. There are places where love and peace and people getting along with each other and no such thing as war, all of that stuff that we think of as utopia actually does exist. And it is a free will society. It is egalitarian form of government. It is not gender biased. It is not elitist. There is a lovely model of Christian creation. And it's very close It's in the Eartha fields, which are they have something to do with the what do they call them? The Van Allen radiation belts, I believe, are connected to the buffers between this reality field of Earth and the larger one around it called Eartha. So we're going to begin the process of learning what we need to do in order to start going through the gates, because they are opening the gates of Eartha to those who can and desire to come through and who are holding the truth of Christian intention in their hearts and in their deeds. Because you can't lie to Christic races, because they know, they feel your encryption. If you're trying to put one over on them, they'll know. Do you think they're going to let you in? Do you think they're going to say, oh, sure, walk through that gate, no problem, come on in and take over my world? No. The gates themselves won't allow you through. You don't need a guard on those gates, because if your encryption is not coherent with the high frequencies in those places and the balance in frequency, which means balance in consciousness in those places, you'll get hurt going through gates. And that's why they're training us how to do it, because by the time we do, we'll be able to go physically through gates. We will also have the understanding of nothing else is worth anything. It is not worth breaking the rules of creation in order to see how far you can stretch free will, because all you end up doing is ending up on a black hole planet where you just about lose the ability to ever go back home, and you realize how precious the original gift was. So we will get there with the activations that we're progressively doing, and it starts with this stuff. Now, this stuff is all about, from the first idea, how that actually gelled, and it was set. The first idea has one thing important about it. It was a focus of consciousness, where Source actually, in its own consciousness field, that you could call the mind of God, had a thought. It wasn't a thought in linear words, but it was a point of focused intention. And that created an oscillation and an imprint of something. The focus of it's almost like if you have a diffused light that is everywhere, and then a part of that light turns into like a laser-like beam and just focuses at one point in that great field of light. And because of that laser-like intensity, it starts making a change in the light itself, and it starts to gel. This is where we get the beginning of the Gelesic states. Now, the first focus of consciousness of Source within itself, within its mind, within the mind of Source, creates an imprint that is carried on the light of its attention. All right, the part of the light that Source turned into a laser-like beam or focus of consciousness, stream of consciousness, carries what is called an encryption in the form of tiny little points of living radiation. It is the encryption that Source itself holds. It is the living eternal life encryption, because there wasn't a point where Source was born. Source was, and always will be. It is an eternal consciousness, intelligent consciousness field. Now, the first encryption has to do with ruse and ers. The first encryption is held in points. They have a specific quantum of energy, stored electrical potential, and they have a positive electrical charge. This is the beginning of understanding states of matter and prematter and before prematter, because we have original encryption, we have eternal encryption, and these all mean something in terms of the types of units that are formed. Now, in the formation of the first particle that all this material will tell you about in deathly detail, this is like, a month's worth of work just to do this series of 5 pages and do them properly in graphs. But there is, if we can understand that at this point, where the creation story first starts, where the first particle is conceptualized before it's even born, there is the first encryption that is set. It is the eternal encryption of Source, and it is carried in a set of 12. This is where the base 12 Chris code eventually comes from. But Source imprinted, with just the attention of its consciousness, an imprint of itself. All right? In making the first particle, before the particle was born, it created an imprint, an image of its own energy signature. That imprint is called the eternal encryption. Now, first particle, before it was born, when it was first conceived, was actually in what's called the image of Source, where it holds the same encryption as, or same set of Gelesic points of radiation in the specific mathematical order that Source itself holds. So that is the eternal encryption. It is the image of Source. In the process of birthing that Partakai one, however, from taking it from just a coagulating thought field and into a form of movement, it's actually a form of movement that causes it to turn around within the same place that it is, but turn around and move outside of the original area of focus that Source had focused on to create that area that gelled. And when it moved out of that area of focus and then back into it, it turned around and it reversed encryption from the top to the bottom. So you have first the eternal encryption of Source, which would have, let's say, if it looked like a Cathara grid or a Tree of Life grid, its top point at the top, that would be the eternal encryption that Source is like, right, the image of. And in the birthing process, that turns around and becomes what's called the original encryption for manifestation, which is the top down. This gives you right there two distinctions that become distinctions of matter, distinctions between atomic and etheric matter. And it's from those distinctions that all sorts of other things are born, including the Taran, each of them carrying a specific combination of the eternal and the original encryption. When you put the eternal and the original encryption together into one form, and that one form becomes what is called the Partaki that forms at the center of the Taran light unit that we'll see in a minute, when you do that, you get what is called the Christ code, or the Christ code, K-R-Y-S-T code. And it is the encryption of eternal life manifestation, where the other is where we have the original and eternal encryption. They are the encryptions for eternal life creation, where the Christ code is for eternal life creative manifestation. So it's not just creating, but it's creating into the manifest arena, which is the beginning of the starborn process. So we are all a part of this. What you're going to see you can interpret the information we cover on a macrocosmic level or a microcosmic level, because it applies to every unit, every particle, and it also applies to every massive cosmos that exists within the manifest body of God. Within the manifest body of God, which exists within the mind of God, it started with the first Partakai, and it moved itself through these phases into becoming the Christ code, which from there became the starborn life cycle process. They called it the starborn budding process, because first reproduction happens through the process called budding. That's different than, let's say, what we know here as sexual procreation. But Source procreates itself, and so do there certain life forms, even on this planet. They tend to be aquatic, I believe, and microscopic and deep sea, but they still spawn by themselves, and they kind of replicate themselves by a process that's known as budding. I think some also can regrow limbs and those kind of things through that same process. The process of budding in its full form is the process of quantum replication. Natural quantum replication through the Christ code implies that a certain quantum was given, and that quantum can interact with itself and create sparks. And as long as those sparks can return back to the original source of creation, then the original source of creation will send forth an equivalent ratio of quantum back. So there's a constant give and take, a flow and a backflow of energy. It's called a backflow. If original quantum is given, say the first Partakai are born, and then they spark and they send a backflow spark or a set of quantums back to source. That process of sending back through the creation point, the backflow sparks, giving back to source, keeps the creation point open, and source turns the energy around and brings more out. And it replicates where there was 3, next there become 6, next there become 12, and next there become 24, then 48, then 144, then 1728, then 20,736. All right? There's a particular ratio of expansion. This is what we refer to as the starborn cycle, and you'll see what those look like, what those graphs look like in a minute, that show you the progressive expansion of creation, first as light, from the first living light unit, that is the Taran. And if we can remember now, before I just kind of ditch the rest of these, there's 5 of these. You don't need to look at them. It just shows you where this starts at, right? What the condition of this mess is when it first starts. But these will take you to the birth of the Triad and then the birth of the Taran. And we will jump from these now to the birth of the Taran. I'm just going to, so you can probably see where they start. Let me see. Yeah, we can just whip through those real fast just so you can see them go by. Yeah. See, this is all This is all the stuff that has to be typeset. Yeah, just one and take it down. See, there's these little graphs that will become full graphs, probably sets of graphs, where it's explaining actually how the stream of consciousness within the body of Source actually created a gelling of the light field that Source is made of itself, right? So this is all about the first particle and how that was first conceived before it was born. So there's that. Keep going. Then there's all sorts of really intense graphs and lots of words that go with this set. So there is this sequence from the thought or an idea in the mind of God Source, and how that became the first particle and the second particle, and how that became the eternal life cycle. All right, so these will fit in eventually. Someday we're going to have a heck of a book, all right, if we ever get time to write it and finish the graphs. Yeah, so see, these are all the things we're working on. The stuff you'll see next was in this condition for quite a while, and you'll see how it progressively evolves and becomes coherent. So we're going to see some graphs, at least some of them have words, and you'll see what this will look like eventually. And then after 5 of those, we didn't have any more time to put the words on. So you'll see the pictures, but they're at least in good form, and they're not scribbled all over like sometimes the graphs are, right? There's a process. We're still in from thought to the first particle. In this series, we also get the birth of electricity and the electricity, and we get the sound of one hand clapping. That actually begins with the particle. So with the particle. So we have to come down a little bit further. But this is literally from the Jaleesic states that form from the focused energy of the consciousness of God Source within the body of light that is itself. You actually have the birth of electricity, light, sound, electromagnetism, and all the primal forces that any primal subconscious unit, any quark, comes from. Right? So we're still in particle starting to take shape as it's starting to gel. This is where Urs and Rus come in, where the encryption is getting set. And Urs are actually the image of, and then the Rus are the reversal of it. And they have a different quantum. And then there's a ratio that happens between them. And these actually have numbers, which is rather frightening, because an I believe, has, 33, I think it's 33 1/3 units of stored positive electrical potential, positive charge electrical potential. And a Ru has half that, I believe. It has, 33, no, it has 11 2/3 negative electrical potential, stored electrical potential. Now, it's interesting, there's a whole series of understanding Urs and Rus that goes with this part that has to do with something called a quantum differential, and that is the difference between the 33 1/3 and the 11 2/3. If you subtract the smaller one from the larger one, it gives you a 21 2/3, I believe, quantum differential. These numbers are actually the numbers that you won't see them when we get to the later graphs because I didn't have time to even plug those in, but they go with what you will see is how many fire letters, how many Kelana sparks does it take to make a Kelon? How many Kelons does it take to make a fire letter? How many fire letters does it take to make a key? How many keys does it take to make a tachyon? And how many tachyons does it take to create the birthing cycle? To allow the winds of what are called the winds of Alay and all the other winds that represent each stage of the starborn cycle. These are all quantum building winds, and we are progressively activating keys now in our bodies, in our shields, in our DNA, in our light bodies. So it helps to understand what they are. So we're still kind of scrolling by all this. We're still at the conception of the first particle. Okay, next one, please. We'll just get on to something coherent. So eventually that will be a nice, neat thing, too. Whoop, we're still on those. There's more. Let's just keep going with those. All of this data, all the new words. I mean, we need a dictionary like this thick at this point. So this you will see eventually in form where you can understand what that process was about as far as how the thought gelled into become the first particle. We need to get past this quick because we're going to be here for 6 years if we try to read all that. Now, Now, we've seen this one before, but we haven't seen it in terms of me talking about it in relation to right after I talked about Rus, Urs, and the eternal encryption that were the points of Jaleesic radiation that in the consciousness beam of Source within itself set an imprint, or the original encryption, within a part of its own consciousness field that began the gelling of the first particle, the conception of the first particle. When we talked about the encryption, the first encryption is the base 12 crystal code encryption. All right, it has 12 Cathara centers. This is what we call the Cathara grid for anybody who might not know. And it's also called the Tree of Life, but that's usually the people who are teaching Metatronic science call it that, and it's shaped differently. The proportions of this are very exacting, and the proportions control everything from how different types of units interact with each other to how much quantum they hold to whether or not they can spark and send backflow sparks back to source. And if they cannot, whatever the creation is that deviates from this pattern for too long will be unable to have living circulation flowing anymore between the manifest state and the source consciousness field in the non-manifest state. What that means is it will become a finite life structure and a finite light structure that will eventually crash and burn within itself. You can't escape from God's source body, but what you can do is end up in black hole fall, which means you will have the ability of your light body will no longer be able to phase, which means no longer spark. It will not be able to send backflow sparks to source, and therefore it will not be able to get quantum replication and regeneration, backflow return sparks from source. So what is happening on this planet right now is this planetary field, but not just this planetary field. A good part of this solar system and this galaxy and this Vecca, which I won't get into that now because that's more Gridmaster stuff, but it's a huge system that is going into the final death throes of its black hole fall. And this has been going on for a very long time, quite a few billions of years actually, and this is the final phase. And we don't all have to join that fall. And that's what the work is about at this point, learning enough about the physics of creation to regenerate the life spark in ourselves. So when that point in time comes, which is called the starfire point, we will be able to ride the currents of the crystal spiral up into ascension, into the Eartha field that is still capable of ascension, of being a natural ascension planet. A natural ascension planet is capable of going back into source for a natural regeneration cycle and popping back out again into manifestation. So we are preparing for that. So I'll start with encryption. When I talk about encryption, imagine each one of those points in that Cathara grid of the original encryption, with the top one being 12. The original would be the top one being 12. They're all little points of Jalesic radiation, or actually they're just radiation points to begin with, but they start to gel as source concentrates a beam of energy in one area of its mind, the mind that is the field, the consciousness field of source. So we start there. These were, we talked about a long time ago, when we started to talk about Partakai. We have Partakai 1 was there. That was the first point when it was created, and that was after the whole process of when it started out as eternal encryption and then had to go through the birthing process and ended up as the original encryption for manifestation, which is with its top down. Right? Once Partakai 1 was here, then Partakai 2 actually filled up with more source energy from the void that was left from the place where Partakai 1 had originally been, and in that process, Partakai 2 births into the center of Partakai 1, splitting Partakai 1 into a Partakum and a Partakai. And these two phase together, and they spark, and that is the whole process. That's the beginning. That's the core meaning that we learned a long time ago about how sparks are made. Sparks collect and make what are called chelons. Chelons collect into groups that are called fire letters or chelon sequences, fire letter sequences. And this whole process begins with the first encryption that's held within the first Partakai, its reversal, and then the birth of the first and second Partakai to where you have an original encryption that is an upside-down version of the eternal encryption. All right, next one, please. I am not going through every one of these phases. This is to show you another part. It's almost like chapter 2 in the creation, the creation of the universe, right? The first one was the thought field and how the first Partakai and second Partakai were born. There are 2 pages of this stuff. It shows you the first 12 actions of first creation. Starting with where you had, over here somewhere. Right. Yeah, where you had Partakai 1, right? There was a process by which you had Partakai 1, Partakai 2 came through it, split it into a Partakum and a Partakai. Partakum has a negative charge, Partakai has a positive charge. So Partakai 2 took the place of Partakai 1 split, but Partakai 1 comes back together, phases, sparks, and this is the process. I'm not going to go through each of these painful stages. It's painful because these are really, really hard. I haven't even got all the words on these, but they show you the process. The circles are all proportionate. right? If you have, say, a 360 full circulation quantum is the quantum of stored electrical potential of a particle, and that equals a certain quotient, right? And you take that and, okay, particle 1 splits, and it splits into 2 equal parts. Which means you got, if you had a 360, it split into 2 equal parts, you got 2 180s. Which means if you have a circle this big, when you're drawing the next bit where it splits, you have to make sure that they're half that size. It is very difficult to draw a lot of these graphs because everything has to be in proportional relationship to each other, or it just completely distorts what the, hello. Hi. Even typesetting for hours and doing paste ups, bless them. So anyway, this set of graphs that I believe we introduced this in Tenerife, shows from the process of particle 1, particle 2 getting birth and splitting, to beginning the sparking process, where the PCM, the pKa, or the particle and the particum come back together and spark. Now, what's interesting, in that first encryption and in that second encryption, the first encryption is the eternal encryption and the second encryption is the original encryption, there are particular vibration signatures. Now, vibration signatures create what would be sound. These are pre-sound sounds. These are very deep core sounds. But if you were to translate them into sounds that we could hear here, each one of these units in particles has a name. All right. When we have when we're talking about just these two phases, we have what's called the umae. All right. We have, I think it was the is a certain creation point flame that's called the variable constant that opens in the center point where the first particle is created, the eternal creation point at the center there. The refers to the void space that is left behind when particle 1 births and particle 2 comes in to fill the void, and then there's a dynamic that takes place. So you have the flame at the center, the A refers to particle 2, and the UN refers to particle 1. So these are sound tones. This is where we get some of the, when we use the different sound tones in the Anahazi and other sacred languages, we are activating those tones in order to activate these encryptions within the shield and within the body. So in this one, where we have particle 2 is born, splits particle 1, the UN, becomes the Ha and the La vibration signature encryption. Okay? When they come together and spark, they become the Hala spark. Okay? Now that spark is, when they first come together, when any particle unit first comes together and they spark, they will create what is called a backflow spark, which means it's a spark that's going back to source first, right? They spark, the spark happens here, and it goes upward, and it carries the two reunited pieces of particle 1, carries them back up into source. Spark goes back up into source. Particle 1 goes back up into source. Then source kicks out what's called a backflow return spark. Now, if Hala was the spark that went up, the encryption sound was Hala, when it reverses, turns around, it becomes the AH-AL, AAH, the Allah. All right? So this is where we get the name Allah first. It is the first backflow return spark from the first backflow spark, from the first phase of the first particle of first creation. Now, the backflow return sparks form eternal standing wave consciousness fields. All right? So each one of these little balls that you see here are actually a consciousness cell that is an identity that is conscious and directly connected very closely in regard to these to source consciousness. So you would have the first backflow return spark called backflow return is the Allah spark. Now that also has specific characteristics. It happens to be an atomic spark because when particle 1 is the one that splits, it will form what is called the atomic matter base. When particle 2 splits, it upsplits, where if you notice particle 1 when it splits down. That's called down phasing, right? That will create atomic sparks, which have certain characteristics. When we get through with the Hala spark going back into source, particle 1 going back in with it, them coming back out, the Allah being born, the Allah standing wave spark being born, the process of the backflow return spark coming back out from source causes particle 2 to split and polarize. But what that does is, as the backflow return spark comes down this way, causes particle 2 to upsplit, or to up phase. And that creates a different quality in the resonance of the matter, and that becomes what are called the etheric matter states. So right here, at the very first beginning of the first few movements, or not even movements yet, the actions of creation, we are getting the seeding of what become the matter types, that become different densities of matter, that become different types of quarks, up quarks, down quarks, charmed quarks, all those kind of quarks. Quarks are sparks in the manifest form in the densities here. Quarks would be the backflow return sparks, where Kelana sparks would be the sparks that go back to source, and then the return, or backflow return, would be the quarks. So this is the process by which quarks and things that are even, let's say, more deeper into creation than quarks, but let's say the forefathers of quarks and foremothers of quarks, all right, we're talking about these sparks. This is the process by which everything originally enters manifest creation. So we have the Allah. The Hala spark makes the Allah on the down phase. It's an atmic spark because it's on down phase. Then when it comes back out, when the Allah spark comes back out, it splits Partakai 2. Partakai 1 resumes the place of the center creation point. Partakai 2 up splits. All right. Partakai 2 is the Ba, B-A, encryption tone, and Da. All right. They come together. They create the Ba-Da, backflow return spark, or backflow spark. The Ba-Da comes back in, goes back into source through creation point, through the flame at creation point, and source sends back out a backflow return spark. And just like the Hala became the Allah, the Ba-Da becomes the Abada. Right? The AAH on the end refers to having passed through the void. All right? The eternal internal void. So this is where we got the first two backflow return sparks. We've got the Allah and we've got the Abada. Somewhere down in here, they go through different, we get that far. Then the process of every time a backflow return spark is sent back out, it creates the condition of splitting the Partakai that's holding the central position. So it initiates another phasing, right? Which initiates another sparking, which initiates another phasing, which initiates another sparking, and it goes on forever and ever and ever. All right. So we've got the first two phases. The first two phases create the first two backflow sparks, backflow return sparks. And then we're finally getting to the Tarn. Through all these things that we don't have to go through, but you can see how just to get to the first phasing of the first two Partakai, like the first Partakai unit, before we even get to the Tarn, all of these diagrams were needed to show the first 12 actions, all right? And if that wasn't bad enough, next one, please. Or there were still more. Right? We're still not to the Taran yet, right? So this is why, and this is how this material comes in transmission. We don't get cliff notes. We don't get summary sheets. You have to analyze the entire and record the entire data flow, and then try to categorize it and pull it. And if it all came in sequence, it'd be a lot easier. Anyway, we're still not quite at the at the Taran yet. I want to show you something too. The next one, please. Those we saw before were the first 12 actions of creation. And while the actions are taking place, the first 12 movements were also taking place. And the movements each of those actions are taking place on a different axis, where there's a rotation that occurs. Every movement, every spark that takes place. So you have the first 12 movements and the first 12 actions. And through all of those things, you get to what is called the birth of the Taran. And in simple terms, you have the Allah spark that forms on the down phase. I'm just going to use any one of these drawings just to illustrate it. And this is one of the diagrams I wanted to get done for today to start, at least lead into this. But there was just no time. It was more important to get some of the other ones done. But let's just say we have down here the spark. That was the first atmic from Partakai 1 splitting. Down spark, right? That is the Allah backflow return spark. That caused the splitting of Partakai 2, which then formed the spark up here, the etheric spark, which actually it formed the spark here, the Bada spark. The Bada spark came back in here. We got the Allah Bada, body of Allah, right? Then the Bada came back in here, made the Abada spark, which is the etheric, the first etheric spark. So you have the first spark of the Partakai the first return spark of the particle, the second return spark of the particle, and then something very interesting happens. Because right now, they're just kind of shifting this way and this way, where if a backflow return spark comes down here, it causes the other unit that's still whole behind it to split up. And if it's a backflow return spark coming out this way, it causes the unit that's here to split down. So it's just splitting up and down at that point. But what happens if you try to make another spark here and you've already got Allah sitting there? This is where something really interesting happens. This is where it would probably take me 25 different things to show the 6 movements involved with it. But what occurs is, again, you have the first phase is a down phase where particle 2 births through particle 1, splits particle 1 makes the hala, then the Allah. The process of Allah being born splits particle 2 that had taken the place of particle 1. Particle 1 takes place of particle 2 as particle 2 splits. You got the second spark here. And the fact of the second spark being born again splits particle 1. So here we go again. We're going to have another atomic spark, right? And it's going to try to come down on the same firing line as the first one did, because they're just rotating. They're just doing the 90 degrees rotation. So what happens when particle 1 splits for the second time? It comes together, sparks hala again. It sends the hala spark back up and remerges itself, sends the hala spark back up into source, and then source brings down again, sends down again another backflow return, what would be another Allah, except Allah bumps in to Allah, and it causes the Allah third one, the third spark, to actually reverse, and it becomes the Allah. All right? So we end up with it reverses, but it also makes it shift this way as the two of the same charge actually hit each other. They have a polarity reaction, electrical polarity reaction. It causes them to push away from each other. This one reverses because it wasn't all the way out yet, so it wasn't as strong as the Allah that was already there. Becomes the Allah over here. The Allah shifts over this way. And something interesting happens at the same time, of course. You've got particle 2 doing its split because there was a birth coming down here, right? And whenever the backflow return spark is coming out, it causes the other one to split. So at the same time that you have the Allahs bumping into each other, spark 1 and 3 bumping into each other, you have spark 2 already sitting up there, and you have the split that would normally form spark 4. With all of this happening and shifts happening where there's actually a momentum generated that pushes these two apart, but then once this one reverses, they start to draw back together again because the polarities aren't opposite anymore. They are opposite. They're not same polarity where they repel each other. But what would have been the ba and the da split of particle 1, these actually get whacked and pulled this way where they go in a horizontal axis and rotate inward, right? And form a central circulation. And it's that central circulation that forms what is called the particle, or the inaka. Now, I'll show you, this is through all these processes, and I'll show you the diagram where it shows those balls in the right place. All right, I hope it's the next one, please. Still at the top. Here we go. There's the beginning of the new diagrams with all the words and all of those things. What that series of 12 first actions and 12 first movements created is what is called the Taran. It is the living light seed. It has the Allah spark, which was the first backflow return spark 1 from the first sparking of particle 1 when it split and sparked and sent its backflow up and its backflow return came out. So you have Allah. These all have categorizations. This one's a Manet primal force. It's atomic positive. It's called photonegative, right? It's the original encryption, which is the reflection of source. Now, I had to get these straightened out because they were driving me crazy before. Who's the reflection? Who's the image of? Who's on first with all this stuff? Because it's very, very precise. So this is the updated information. When I first began to introduce this, I remember saying, I think this is what they are, but I'm not exactly sure, but I know this is Allah, right? So we're getting more and more fine-tuned on the information that applies to each of these parts. We have backflow return spark 1 here, Allah. It is atomic because it was made from the splitting and phasing of particle 1. Up here, I won't even get into the fact that if it's particle 1, originally started with the eternal encryption, then it reversed to become the original encryption, and when it makes return backflow sparks to go back to source, I believe they carry the original encryption, and then the backflow return sparks come back out backwards, they're upside down, so they carry the eternal encryption. I mean, it's back and forth and back and forth. It's something like that. I think I said that wrong, but you get the idea. of how hard it is to track these movements. It can take you 20 years to track the first 6 movements. But we have the Allah spark here. Now, these are cells of consciousness within the first thing that's called the living light seed. So we went from just sparks that were happening in and through this Partakai number 1 and Partakai 2 to the Allah, to number 2, which is the etheric spark. It was created by the up phase, or the splitting of Partakai 2, when the birth of this one occurred. Remember, this one birthed down this way, and it didn't come over here until this one was born and hit it and whacked it over that way. All right, so this was the one that was here. All right, this was Allah. It was born originally on that line and then shifted over this way. Then we got the Abada, which was from the Ba and the Da backflow spark, and the return, which is the reverse of that into the Abada. Okay, and then we have the third one here, which is the Ale. Now, it was another Allah coming in, had the same polarity, same positive electrical charge as the Allah would have had. I think it's positive, yeah. I have to read these through to make sure, that I had written them right. But anyway, this is where the second Allah coming bumped into the first, and they pushed away from each other, and it reversed the spin on this one. So it actually created another atomic spark, because it's from the split of Partakai 1, but it's an atomic that has a negative electrical charge, where the Allah has a positive atomic electrical charge. But they're still both atomic. But one is positive electrical, one is negative electrical. This has to do with not only original versus eternal encryption, but how many roos and how many ers are holding that encryption. Because I believe there's something, I'm not sure what it's called, but it is a quantum of 15. And an is that, whatever it's called, 15. Times 2 plus 3 1/3, which is the divine constant that has to do with the flame at the center. And where you have roos, you have times 1, 15, minus 3 1/3, and it gives you 11 2/3, and that's where you get the ratios of how much quantum is being stored. And all that has to do later with keys and joules and how much frequency your body's running on when you come down to here. So anyway, we have the Allah, we have the Abada, and here we have the Ale. The 2 atomic and the 1 etheric units. They all have specific primal forces. The Ale carries the Ire primal force. The Allah carries the Mane primal force. And the encryptions, I won't even get heavily into this, but here's where, when you see in Kathara 2.3 manual, we talk about photonegative and photopositive. We talk about later ethos and eros and all these other strange currents. Where are these? Where do they start? Where do they come from? Here. They start from here with the first 2 types of currents, the atomic and the etheric. There is photo something or other. Lost a word there. Reversed. Yeah, anyway, we'll get into these at a different time, but I want you to see where encryption comes from, what it has to do with, to understand that the encryption held in these is held in little points of Jaleesic units. And at the center here, something interesting happens. That is when this interaction of all those steps that it would take a lot of diagrams to show what happened when the second Allah tried to birth and whacked this one over here, it reversed, then they pulled back together. It caused this one to bounce up and down, and that created sparks in the center. And the 2 that had split from Partakai 2 that would normally have phased up, phased down to the side and pulled together in the center and formed this. And this is called the Partaki. Okay? Now these 3 are Partakai sparks. A Partaki is different in one sense. It carries 2 things. One, it carries the ability to photogenerate. It is a photogenerator living light unit. It also carries what is called where's the encryption in here? Okay. The Christ Allah, eternal plus original encryption. It carries both of them. All right, so that is the core crystal program. That is the beginning of the program for manifestation, for eternal life manifestation. But the eternal plus original encryption creates what is called catheric matter. All right, so we had atomic, then we have from the ones, we have from spark 2, the etherics, and then spark 1 and 3 are atomic. 2 is etheric, 3 is catheric. That is carrier of what's called the Manu force. All of these have different names, like the Cristale, all right? They call this the Ina Ka. They call these the 3 Ina, All right? When we do the toning, the umae, that I told you about, treinae, right? You got the treinae. And the ekasha is, there's, in the there is something called the diamond door, which has to do with something called the nada or, and there's a little EC, X spark, that forms there. And then there's another thing that has to do with Jaleesic states that we'll see in a minute that is called the Ka field. And then something that, because of those and the interactions that take place within this particle unit, there's something called the Sha. And the Ek Ka Sha is the living ovum of living light, from which light, electromagnetism, consciousness expressing in the form of electromagnetism, and life are created. We all have this core encryption in our bodies. We all started with this core encryption. Now, I won't go into all the little words. I just want you to see that they're there, and this detail will be forthcoming at some point. But this is where all of the 55 graphs that follow this we would like to get them there, but there's no way, especially when they had our suitcases lost until yesterday. Because the art was done on Mylars, waiting for just word overlays to be put in. But the Mylars didn't show up. They weren't here because they were lost in the suitcase. So we'll get them eventually. I just want you to see where it's going. We started at the top with a thought. We're now down to the point where we got the living light unit. All right, living light unit is important because this is where the beginnings of the elemental consciousness are coming from. We'll deal with this a little bit more tomorrow because I'm going to take you back to this. After we get through a bunch of other stuff tomorrow, I'm going to take you back to this to connect it to the information they're just giving, and I have more graphs to do tonight. In the morning, it's already morning, right? Where it connects into the elemental command and the consciousness fields that are some of the core consciousness fields, or let's say probably the first 5 elementals. Because I believe it works that there are 12 elementals, and they create elements. They create the 12 elementals, and they each create 12 elements, and each of the 12 elements each create 12 actuaries, whatever that is. So I'm looking forward to finding this out, but this is the information we need to understand if we want to start to understand what elemental command is, what are these elemental forces running through our body, and that are very much a part of whatever we encounter when we have relationships in any form, including sexuality. So anyway, next one, please. We'll go on from there to, here we go. Yeah. This is showing the beginning of, can I see the title, please, Ann? Thank you. The 15-layer ovum of living light within the Taran. Now, this is still the Taran unit, the first light unit. All right. This area here, that center ball, all right, is the Pardaki unit. Now, inside of this unit, there are 9 inner layers and 6 outer layers. Each one of them a different Jaleesic state. These are the beginnings, and they each have an encryption tone and sound, and of course they each would have specific characteristics inherent to them and those kind of things. But it's most important just to understand that there are 6 outer layers within the Pardaki, and the Pardaki actually extends this far. So you have 6 outer layers and then the 9 inner layers. And the 9th layer, if you count them moving out from the middle, is called the Ka. Now, the Ka layer, we have the Ka, the Ma, and the Ta, and they progressively run back in here. We have the charts with all their little names and what state of ether vapor they actually are. Because what we're dealing with is something called the Etha, or the Eta is what it started as way back in the first particle was conceptualized before it was born, when it was first a thought. All right, so it has to do with this Eta substance that goes through this process in the birthing of the particle process, where it becomes eventually the ethers, and it is the core of all manifest transaction or a manifestation of any kind, where consciousness turns into ethers, and then the ethers become different things. So all of that information of how those ethers get there, that's in that first stage of the journey before the birth of the first particle. So eventually